Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members and officers. Welcome to the Planning Committee. In the interests of safety, if the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust Fire Marshal's regulations, please remember to sign out when you leave the building after today's meeting. Thank you. For those of you who have not attended this committee before, I will explain the running order for this afternoon. After the committee members have declared their interests and agreed the minutes of the previous meeting, I will announce each item and ask those of you who are here to make a deputation to come and sit at the table. After the planning officer has made the presentation for the application, individual deputies will have 6 minutes to express their views, and joint deputies will have 12 minutes between them to make their views known. After which you will take no further part in the proceedings unless we need to ask a question to clarify a statement that has been made. Members will then ask questions, make comments, and the decision on the application will be made. Both members of the committee and members of the public are reminded of the need to consider material planning matters and not refer to any personal information about other members of the public, and I underline that. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of those making deputations, but there will be some footage of those making deputations as they approach and leave the table, where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room while the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record the meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Lastly, may I ask everyone to use the microphones provided when they are speaking. The single button on the right-hand side should be pressed down, a little light will come on, then you are on, and at the end please switch it off. Now I think it would be useful for members of the public to know who we are, what we are, and why we are here. So we will go around the table. I'm Councillor Hugh Mason, I'm a councillor for St Jude Ward, and I'm the chairman of the Planning Committee.
I'm Jane Didino, Local Democracy Officer.
I'm Judith Smythe, Ward Councillor for St Jude Ward and Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
Luke Stubbs, Councillor on Eastern Carys Water, Committee Member.
Lynn Stagg, Councillor for Baffin's Ward.
Steve Pitt, Councillor for Central Southsea.
Donna Jones, Councillor for Hilsey.
Councillor Gemma New, Councillor for Paulsgrove Ward.
Councillor Robert New and Councillor for Copner Ward.
Jane Thatcher, Planning Officer.
Simon Turner, Planning Officer.
Sim Manley, Development Manager.
Kieran Laven, Planning Solicitor.
Right, before moving on, it would be my intention to take item 4 on your agenda, appeal decisions relating to a change of use applications from C4 HMO to sui generis HMO, to take that at the end of the meeting. That's enabling those who have come to make deputations to make them in a reasonable space of time. Does that meet with the Planning Committee's approval? No objections? Right. First of all, apologies for absence. Do we have apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. Councillors Susie Horton and Claire Oody sent their apologies, as did Councillor Joe Hooper, and Councillor Robert New is here deputising for her.
Welcome, Councillor New. Declarations of members' interest. Do any members have any interest to declare? Councillor Pitt.
Some clarification, please, Chair. The item that's on here for Meat and Barrel for Palmerston Road, I wasn't previously on the many occasions that this has been in front of us before, but I am now the Cabinet Member. So obviously one of the owners has a relationship with the Council in terms of his business, which I'm more closely associated, I can't speak today, more closely associated with than I was previously. However, so I was minded to look at stepping aside for the item, but since it's probably the third time it's been on the agenda, and I've said about all I could possibly say about this item in its previous guises, in public and on record, I don't think that necessarily it is a conflict, but I'd welcome some advice from Kieran.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I would say that although you may have looked at it previously, you are obviously looking at it on its own merits today, and therefore you would need to assure yourself that there is no kind of predetermination in your mind. It may be the case that you feel more comfortable not sitting on the item, but that is a matter for you to decide for yourself as a matter of conscience.
Okay, in that case, I won't sit on the item, although I suspect that just might cause a problem for the committee.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Chair. Same item, item 14. I need some advice on what becomes personal or prejudicial. The half owner of the business is someone who I know and count as a friend. There would be no financial personal gain for me at all. I'm not connected in any way financially to him. But being open and transparent with that, I mean, you know, I know it's a slightly grey area in terms of friendships. I only know him through the council. It's not that I know him other than that. But yeah, but I think I've been on holiday with him, so you know, I think I need to put it out there that he is a friend.
Again, it would be the same advice that I'd give to Councillor Pitt. That's in a grey area, as you acknowledge, where you've got to assure yourself that you wouldn't be closing your mind to any particular outcomes when reviewing the application, and it may be advisable in these circumstances that you do step aside. But that is a matter for your own personal conscience.
Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor New.
Exactly the same as Councillor Donna Jones.
Right, thank you.
He was also on the same holidays.
Oh, this sounds interesting. Okay. Councillor Stubbs.
I do know the applicant in that item as well, so this is, but I think, unless other people are going to do anything else, I'm just going to declare that as personal.
Thank you. Right, that's it. We now come to minutes of the previous meeting. You have before you, members, minutes of the meeting held on the 9th of January, and I have been advised that there is a correction to be made to item number 140. Firstly, the numbering of that item is wrong. It should be 18/01211/full. And the second correction is that the item had not been dealt with under Officer Scheme of Delegation, but would be. And I wish to substitute, therefore, the words would be for had been. I think that is...
Had been for would be.
Yeah. So, and also it had been included on the agenda in error. Okay.
Just for clarity, I might read that out from my own notes. So there's the substitution of the reference number for, I believe it's 18/01211/FUL, and it would read as follows: that this item was included on the agenda in error and would be dealt with under the Officer Scheme of Delegation. The committee acknowledged that conditional permission would be granted subject to the conditions set out in the report by the Assistant Director of City Development.
Agreed. Thank you.
Just put your initials next to that.
Right. Are there any other items from the previous meeting? Nope. Can we have updates on the previous planning applications by the Interim Assistant Director for City Development, which I suspect is you, Mr. Manley. No updates. No updates, thank you very much. We then move on to the items on the agenda. The first one is number 243, Fawcett Road, Southsea. I have a Mr. Anthony Lane, if he is here, who is the applicant. Would you like to come to the table if you wish to make a deputation? Right. Can we have the officer's report on this, and then we will hear Mr. Lane.
Good afternoon. The application is for a change of use from C4 HMO to an 8-person, 8-bed HMO. The application site relates to a 2-storey mid-terrace property located to the north of Fawcett Road, close to its junction with Sutherland Road, just where the road bends around to the west. It's noted the property has a lawful use as a C4 HMO. As the property had a historic C4 use, this did not result in the creation of a new HMO. In considering several recent appeals which related to similar developments, whilst the inspector recognised policy PCS 20, it was opined that as the development was not creating a new HMO, there was no material change to a balance of uses in the area. Placing significant weight on recent appeals, which are documented in the officer's report, the LPA must accept the proposal would not result in a further imbalance of HMO uses and would not be able to defend this position at appeal. This relates to all 4 HMOs which you will hear about today. This is the front elevation of the property. It's noted at the time of a site visit a rear dormer and a rear extension had already been constructed. Furthermore, amended plans were received from the agent which saw the 8th bedroom added at the expense of the communal space and a basement lounge added. So those were the superseded plans and these are the amended plans received. The pre-existing layout of the property comprised of 4 bedrooms. However, the proposed layout comprises of 8 bedrooms, 3 located on ground floor, 3 at first floor and 2 in the converted loft space. It is noted all of the rooms except for bedroom 7 would benefit from an ensuite. The proposed plans would see the loss of a separate lounge and the kitchen subdivided to form an additional bedroom. Furthermore, the existing basement has been converted to form a new separate lounge. It was possible to gain access to all of the rooms while undertaking a site visit. It was evident from the bedrooms that were seen on site and from the enclosed plans that the bedroom sizes are too small to act as a main living area, bedroom and study area for an adult. It is also noted that the 2 bedrooms within the converted loft space have restricted headroom, which limits the usability of the room. Whilst the kitchen and lounge meet the minimum sizes, there is no separate dining area room provided within the property, and therefore the communal space would be considered inadequate. In addition, the proposed lounge located at basement floor level would only be served by a small light well, and would therefore fail to provide a suitable degree of natural light, outlook and ventilation. With regards to above, it is considered the basement lounge would not provide a good standard of living environment for future residents and users of the development. Some photos of the site. This is the rear elevation. You can see the rear dormer has been constructed and the single-storey extension. Works were going on, so I wasn't able to take the best photos, but we can see a kitchen on the left and a bedroom on the right with an ensuite door there. This is the proposed basement lounge, as you can see. So as the proposal falls short of planning standards identified in the HMO SBD, it is advised that the proposed layout of the property is not suitable for the occupation of 8 adults sharing. For a reason set out in the officer's report, the recommendation is for refusal. Thank you.
Right, thank you everyone. Just a couple of things to clear up, which possibly was our architect's mistakes, but just to let you know. So we didn't put a rear extension on the property, that was already on there, so we simply carried out a dormer in the roof, so that extension was already there. Also as well, it was originally a bathroom out the back, which we'll see in a minute as well. So it wasn't ever a communal space as such, it was always a bathroom. So again, if that was our error, I can only apologise for that. With regards to the basement as well, which again we're covering a bit, that also wasn't painted. So again, in terms of the light, it probably wasn't the best picture. So I'll put a few others in there so we can get an idea on the light anyway. So yeah, I've just got some pictures of the original house. The chap lived out in France. It had very little management. The neighbours said, you know, you used to get some trouble from it. And it wasn't really well looked after. So it was just pretty old in there really. And there was a lot of damp work. There was a lot of leaks from the roof as well, which we had a lot of retentions on the survey. So just to give you an idea on what was there. So that was a middle floor bathroom, shower room. That was a lounge straight in off of the front of the road. Another bedroom. That was the bathroom, which was downstairs at the back. So that was obviously what we were mistaken for the kitchen, but that's what was originally at the back there in that extension. So just put some pictures on so again so you can see the finished article in terms of where that's moved on to now as well. So we've got a state-of-the-art alarm system in there. It's literally the best one you can get. We've got a sensor in every single room. We've got a sounder in every floor. We've got a heat alarm in the kitchen, and it's controlled by a panel, and a series of break glasses on every single floor as well, which again, before I think there was, you know, 2 interlinked, very, very old and probably untested smoke alarms in there as well. So on that front, it's come a lot safer. We've soundproofed every single wall next to neighbours, so massive expense on that. We've taken it back to brick. We sound coat the walls and then we board over the top of that with a soundboard as well, just to try and limit any issues with the neighbours. New windows, new doors, we have a brand new boiler in there, everything's completely rewired, so in terms of its efficiency, it's a lot better. And obviously there's brand new fire doors fitted throughout as well as the soundproofing and the fireproofing in the basement. So that's the finished kitchen without all the tools and everything on there. It's difficult to kind of take it in a bit of a enclosed space, but we've got everything that meets the requirements for the housing standards on that side of things. That's the top floor bathroom, so they've got a shared bathroom at the top and then 6 bedrooms underneath benefit from en-suites as well. There's also a shared toilet on the middle floor as well, so for any guests they've got somewhere else they can go. That's just some extra pictures of examples of the en-suites, the hallways, and just generally the quality of the finish on this one. So in terms of the issues that have come up, we like to think that, you know, we can hopefully put your minds at rest with that. So this is the loft room at the front, which is the only one that's got a sloping roof. So the other one in the loft doesn't actually have a sloping roof, but you can probably see that it's clearly more than 7.5 square metres. It's actually just over 10. This was the middle one. Now the only other problem with the plans as well, this one originally had a ensuite attached to it, which we actually removed to ensure that we had a adequate bedroom space in there as well. So the top 2 bedrooms don't have the ensuite, but they take some over 10 square metres. So I think we've got 5 that are over 10 square metres, even including any bathrooms. Another issue that came up was the rear bedroom, which came up from the housing standards. It was pointed out to me that there was concerns over the proximity of that bedroom to the kitchen in terms of fire. So there's actually a door with a closer, which comes straight off the kitchen. Then you've got an ensuite with a solid wall, and then just in front of that you've got another FD30 fire door, accompanied by a fire escape window with a fire escape hinge at the back straight into the garden. So in terms of it being unsafe, it's probably actually the safest room in the house, and it's also well away in terms of the sound from the kitchen as well. These are just some other pictures as well. So it was taken obviously once it had been painted. So we've got a fire escape window on the top left hand corner, which since this has been taken there's actually been a emergency ladder put in there. Now to be honest, we didn't actually have to do that, we were told, but we put it in. So should there be a fire and the escape route be blocked, they can actually get up and get out through that escape window, as well as the light well to the right of that, which then drives a lot more light in. So as I said, with paint on the walls, it's a lot brighter down there. Also as well, we've got the heating and ventilation system Flatmaster, which actually will do an entire property. We've got that just for the basement, which draws cold air in from outside and pushes fresh air around as well. So again, it eliminates any pollutants and stops any damp coming in. And the entire basement's been tanked as well, so it's completely 100% watertight. We've got 5 bedrooms that are 10 metres squared or above, which in theory, according to housing standards, that eliminates the need to have a communal space, which I've never really understood. Always wanted to provide a communal space. But it obviously would reduce the size of the communal space that we're supposing it had. Now, I did have Chris Andrews out from Housing Standards at the beginning, and he's also come out at the end as well, and indicates to me he's got no problems with anything there, and it's actually probably one of the best ones he's seen. Also on that, he did mention an overall communal space, including the kitchen, of 24 square metres, and we're coming in about 31, I think, combined. We've got a breakfast bar in the kitchen for a student-style dining area, and we've also got a breakfast bar in the basement as well, under the stairs, where they can eat their food. Very little times we ever see them crouched around a table in the dining room, all sharing the Christmas dinner. So we're trying to keep it in line with what they're used to. If we put a table in there, they don't tend to use it. So hopefully that should have covered the dining part of it as well. Just down the bottom there, just gives you some ideas on appeals. I think 4 of those are mine anyway, in terms of ones that obviously have been appealed and have been overturned that were refused previously. So 22 Jesse Road, 7 people in that property had a 20.5 metre square communal space, which obviously was all in one room. However, for one more person, we've added another 11 square metres of communal space. It really is a large house, and the rooms that actually come under 10 square metres only come under that because they've got an ensuite in there, which obviously adds a little bit to their living space and their comfort. So should they have not been in there, every single room, I think apart from one, actually would have been in excess of 10 square metres. But obviously I appreciate that as a planner we don't count the en-suites. So that would in essence give it no need to actually have
the end of your 6 minutes, sir.
Yeah, I think we're pretty much there. That was just an updated bedroom schedule, so without the ensuite, that just shows the 5th bedroom in there. Also as well, in the planning wording, it did state that the communal lounge was 15.5. It is actually, and always was, which was detailed right at the beginning of the application by the architect, is just over 19 square metres. So again, I think we were 4 square metres out in the report on that one. Again, that was the updated plan, obviously, which I think you've already seen that. And this was a similar one, 8 bedroom in Bailey's Road, which was just a straightforward communal, had smaller communal space than this one.
We are dealing with 243
Yeah.
Fawcett Road, and you had your 6 minutes, sir.
No problem.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Members, questions? Councillor Smythe.
I wondered if we'd been able to verify the few new measurements that we've been given today, so that we're not left with our reporter against the word of the applicant.
Up until now, I wasn't aware of any measurements. I've scaled the plans which I received from the architect, and they're the measurements I've used, and that's what we condition against those plans.
Councillor Stagg.
How much headroom is there in the loft room, which has got the sloping roof? When I say how much headroom, I mean, yes, how high it is, but also how much of the room has got that headroom, if you understand what I mean.
Livable space.
Yeah, that's the word. Yes, livable space. Thank you.
I've calculated it at 10.7, which would be above 1.5 metres. Sorry, so we don't count headroom if it's under 1.5 metres. We don't count that in floor area.
Councillor Pitt.
I think you're going to be patient with me, Chair. I've got an awful lot of questions here. You just said you calculated it at what, Jane?
Bedroom 7, 10.7 metres squared.
Because it says in the report, it is not clear that the usable space within this room exceeds 6.5 metres square. Although what the relevance of 6.5 metres square is, I'm not sure, because 7.5 is what we would be looking for.
What page is that in the report? Sorry.
Page 5.
These comments are from private sector housing. I'm not sure where they got their figures from. I did query it with Claire, and that's the feedback that she gave me on that.
Chair, I know it's not comments yet, but I think this is a basket case, and us sitting here trying to get to the bottom of it right now without private sector housing in the room, who are an intrinsic part of the SPD, is going to be fruitless. And I would welcome whether other members disagree or not. We've got issues about whether a bathroom was a bathroom. We've got lack of clarity around the rules around ensuite inclusions. Most of these, we started, when we were doing the blanket call-ins, Bruce Lomax was coming here to answer these sort of questions. We don't have anyone from private sector housing here, and I don't think it's fair that Jane should be asked to answer questions that are in the report that clearly are being challenged by the applicant, when private sector housing, who wrote that part of the report, are not here to defend them.
Councillor Smythe.
I would second that, because I don't think we can make decisions without having independently verified room sizes to consider.
Are you therefore suggesting, to go to the chase, that we defer this for private sector housing to be here? Would you also wish to have a site visit?
No, I don't think a site visit is necessary, but I think we need we can't have a report where we're conflicting between two different bits of our own council within the same report and have any credibility with the decision when the recommendation's for refusal and we know that the applicant's immediately going to appeal. I just don't see that we can possibly proceed on that basis.
Councillor Jones.
And whether or not someone from private sector housing comes to the next meeting, if the deferral is carried today, perhaps they can just sort out the space in the report, even if private sector housing aren't here at the next meeting, because it is a planning meeting, that actually the report, the two different departments, as Councillor Pitt said, agree on the sizes.
So in view of the disagreement within the report, it has been proposed, I think, by Councillor Pitt and seconded by Councillor Smythe that we should defer this to the next meeting in order to get accurate information, because we cannot come to a clear decision on the information which is before us. That is what you proposed. Those who would support that, please show. That is unanimous. That is deferred for further information. We now move on to 358 London Road. There is no deputation on this, but can I have the officer's report, please?
The application is for a change of use from a C4 HMO to a 10-person, 6-bedroom HMO. The application relates to a 2-storey mid-terrace property located to the east of London Road. The front elevation is set back from a highway by a front forecourt, which is predominantly used for the storage of waste. The layout shows 6 bedrooms, 2 of which would have en suites. All bedrooms exceed the size standards for a double bedroom, which is 11.5 metres squared, and the communal facilities are considered adequate and meet the needs of 10 adults. This shows you the ground and first floor plans. And then we have the second floor plan, which is in the roof space, and a list of room sizes provided. The rear garden is fairly large, and it includes a garage at the end, which can be used for cycle storage. A few pictures from inside the property. We've got the communal area and kitchen area, and then a separate kitchen located within the loft space. And some bathroom facilities there. As noted, 2 bedrooms have en suites for use, and a picture of some of the bedrooms. So for a reason set out in the officer's report and in accordance with the HMO SBD, the property is considered to provide an adequate standard of living for 10 people sharing, and the recommendation is for conditional permission.
Members, questions? Councillor Stubbs.
I suppose it's somewhat of a related question to the last report, and forgive me, I'm obviously moving through this report in a moment, but in page 15 there's reference made to private sector housing and toilets and bathrooms. Can you just quickly say what your position is in terms of the provision of toilet and bathroom facilities in this application?
So bedroom 5 would have an ensuite. Bedroom 6 would have an ensuite. There would be a shower room at ground floor, which would have, which would measure 4.23 metres squared. There would be an additional bathroom at second floor, which would measure 5.94 metres squared, and there would be a separate WC with hand basin on second floor, which would measure 1.53 metres squared.
Well, I'm just trying to figure out the differences between private sector housing's comments and yours. So can you tell me on what basis they may be saying it doesn't meet standards, and are those planning standards or housing standards it doesn't meet?
It's noted that this application went through 3 separate revisions, working with the applicant. So I'm unsure if private sector housing were looking at the latest revision of the plans, but in terms of planning standards and what's noted in the SBD, they all meet the measurements required in the HMO SBD.
Right, well, I might ask a question which is related to that. Being chairman, of course I can. We have this statement which Councillor Stubbs has noted: 2 bath shower rooms and 2 separate WCs, an adequate number for 10 people sharing. Now, given that 2 of the rooms have ensuite facilities, would that be an adequate number for 8 people sharing?
Yes, it would. The SBD quotes figures for 7 to 10 people, and this property meets the requirements for 7 to 10 people sharing.
Councillor Stagg.
Thank you, Chair. Somewhere I've read, and I can't find it now, that the conservatory is included as a potential extra living space. What I want to know is the conservatory double glazed and is it heated? Because it'll be fine in summer, I'm sure, but in winter, if it isn't, it wouldn't be. So it wouldn't be able to be counted. I wouldn't have thought as reasonable living space. I think I've read it somewhere.
I have got a picture of the conservatory from the rear. I mean, on the site visit, it was warm, it appeared double glazed, and it appeared to provide a good standard accommodation. You can see the sort of high standard in this photo of the kitchen and communal space.
Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. You've got a 6-bedroom house with 10 people, so 4 of the bedrooms are 2-person, 2 of the rooms are 1-person. And I'm just quickly looking on the plan that we've had submitted to have a look if the largest bedrooms are the ones with the en-suites, in which case they're likely to be the double rooms, if that makes sense. So you've got 14.58 is one of them, and 17.6, which is big, which is obviously a front room because it's got the bedroom 5 that looks like it's a first floor room. That's a very large bedroom. So bedroom 4 is not the largest, but it's certainly not the smallest. So they probably are double rooms. So you've got 4 out of the 10 people using 2 of the bathrooms. Therefore, you've got 6 people using 4 bedrooms have got 2 have got en suites. That's what, so you've got 6 people using 2 bathrooms. So effectively 3 people per bathroom, which fits in with the SPD from what we've been told. So, and I do remember when we had anomalies between private sector housing's policy around space standards and what was acceptable, and our HMO SPD going back about 2 years ago, and we specifically requested that the 2 departments sat down together to make sure that we weren't getting these anomalies, and it's really disappointing that they're coming forward again, because actually from a planning perspective it fits the HMO. I don't see we've got any grounds to refuse this today at all, but yet private sector housing team would have us saying no, it's not adequate. Something needs to change going forward, and it should have already have happened anyway, so I'll be supporting it today.
I'd like those comments minuted because I think it is very important. Any further questions? Councillor Pitt.
I'm just struggling to make out exactly what's going. This is, if the applicant's watching this from home, that some really better drawn plans would have been really helpful here. On the ground floor, the shower room at the back is off the conservatory. Yeah.
Yeah.
We are 100% clear that the conservatory is a livable room, and we're not asking people to go out beyond the. I mean, I don't want to call it an outside privy, but can I have some reassurances that it isn't one?
To go outside and have a shower.
Yeah, exactly. And it's it's after the kitchen. It also appears to be the only toilet or wash facilities on the ground floor. So if you're in the front bedroom, you've got a bit of a hike together loo, so a little bit of clarity around that would be helpful. On the second page, where we're looking at the first floor, they're actually removing a shower room from bedroom 4. Can you let me know if that's correct? And then so I'm only seeing 1 ensuite, not 2. Unless the second floor one is they're taking that out, that says to be removed.
Sorry, yeah.
So are they removing that or not? So it looks to me, and I'm happy to stand corrected, is it the case that only bedroom 5 actually has an ensuite, or is the enormous bathroom on the second floor the ensuite for bedroom 6, which doesn't look to me very much like a shared house, but looks an awful lot to me like somebody's going to create a flat as part of that shared house. Is there a danger here that we end up with what is effectively a flat on the second floor, with the rest of the property being used as an HMO, and would that be a lawful use?
First of all, bedroom 6 has an ensuite in the second floor, and bedroom 5 has an ensuite. The ensuite to bedroom 4 is being removed because it didn't meet private sector housing's requirements, so that is being removed. What was the second point?
You've got a bedroom, which is a very large bedroom, and a kitchen and a bathroom on the top floor. Looks an awful lot like a flat to me. Why would you put a kitchen on the second floor when you've got a huge kitchen on the ground floor? I'm just really suspicious about this, because I know a lot of the properties up in that part of the city, and loads of them have been illegally subdivided over the years, and I've always been an advocate for the north of the city getting the same treatment as the south of the city gets. And this just smells bad to me, Jane.
I did query this with the applicant because it was a concern I had, but to access that flat, you have to go through the whole property. There is no internal, it's not hived off in such a way. You would still have to go through the same door, the same staircase.
You do that with every block of flats I'm aware of as well.
Councillor Jones.
If you read the history, and I might be putting 2 and 2 together and coming up with 5 here, they previously had a 12-person HMO refused, so I'm assuming that kitchen has been made a living space because previously they wanted it to be a bedroom and it was deemed to be an overdevelopment. Is that right? Because it might be they've just put kitchen on there because it's a living space because they couldn't have it as a bedroom. At the beginning it says in the planning history. Is that correct? Because that would have been the obvious place to put a bedroom, wouldn't it? So.
The planning history relates to a rear garage. They wanted to do a first floor extension to a rear garage. It's nothing to do with the actual property.
Make it a 12-bed HMO?
I mean, planning history, I'm looking at, I can see construction of first floor extension to existing garage, that was refused.
On the first page, page 13, the proposal, planning permission is sought for a change of use on class C4 house and multiple occupation to a 6-bedroom, 10-person sui generis house and multiple occupation. It's noted the description of development has changed and the number of occupants reduced from 12 to 10. So sorry, it wasn't a previous application, but at some point obviously they were considering when they submitted a 12-person HMO, but they've reduced it to 10, I'm assuming, because that wouldn't have then met the standards.
Yeah, so there were several amended descriptions with this one, and the applicant settled on 10 because that is what he was advised by private sector housing, which would be appropriate for the size of a house.
Councillor Pitt.
So going back into that planning history, Councillor Jones is right, to the top of page 14, if we look at the construction of first floor extension to existing garage to provide 1-bedroom studio flat, which looks an awful lot like the 1-bedroom studio flat that's now the second floor of this property. I've got some real concerns about whether or not we're actually allowing a flat to be delivered here as part of an HMO, which is not something we would normally consider. I don't know what guarantees we can have going forward by condition.
Mr. Manley.
The situation is that for the formation of a separate flat, that would require planning permission in its own right. And as such, if they were to subdivide it and occupy it for that purpose, then they would need to submit a planning application. If they were to do that without permission, they would be subject to enforcement action.
Thanks, Sim, and I understand that, but we also know that people have ways of getting around these things. Okay.
Councillor Smythe.
I'm again with this one. I feel that the plans are entirely inadequate to be described by the text that makes sense, and I think we've got the similar problem as before. For example, do these shower rooms contain WCs? Why aren't they called en suites? We could be giving a permission to something that isn't quite as we understand it from the text. I do think, again, we should be asking the applicant for better, more accurate plans that we can really make a judgment about. And I'm also suspicious about the, we're into the territory of when is a flat. If 2 people occupy that top floor without any amendments and they're the sole users in practice of the kitchen and the bathroom WC up there, then, that is a flat, whether or not it's got planning. I understand the planning laws, so I would like more clarification on this, and I just feel we need to see reports with clear facts in that we can judge.
There's also the question of how this top floor, which we have talked of as possibly changeable to a flat at some future stage, whether that kitchen actually has water supplied to it and could take water from it. The location appears odd.
There's a picture of the kitchen within the roof space on the right-hand side, so it is fully functioning as a kitchen.
Thank you. Councillor Pitt.
Yes, sorry. Earlier on we asked for some clarification around the bathroom facilities being suitable or not. The question I've got is that bedroom 1, bedroom 2, bedroom 3 and bedroom 4 will not have any ensuite facilities. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Those 4 bedrooms are all suitable for double occupancy, and therefore there is the potential for 8 people to have access to 1 bathroom and 1 shower room, does that meet our requirements?
So there are 2 bathrooms in the property, so I'm not sure what your point is.
I thought that we had a requirement up to a certain number of people, and then over a certain number of people that changed. So I'm asking, is it okay for 8 people to share a bathroom and a shower room?
No, the requirements are for 7 to 10 people, there must be 2 separate bathrooms and 2 separate WCs with wash basins. However, 1 WC may be contained in the bathroom, one of the bathrooms.
So has the shower room on the ground floor got a WC?
At the time of the site visit, the shower room had not been constructed, but so I'm unable to answer that at the moment because it hasn't been.
Well, if we can't answer it, Chair, we can't make a decision.
Councillor Stubbs.
This is a sort of question, stroke comment. So you can see, looking through these plans, that the second floor is on a smaller footprint than the first and ground floor, and I'm not quite sure which way it rotates, if you like, because there's 2 staircases on the first floor, and I'm not completely sure which one it goes, which one they're going up to the top. I suspect it's the one which on the first floor is showing running left, right, just that's next to bedroom floor. And if that's the case, it's got a door. It's got a door at the bottom of the stairs. So it's a flat.
So, yeah, there is a door. That's for fire safety door.
Any further questions before we come to comments? Comments, members. Councillor Pitt.
It's a flat and an HMO in one building with 1 bathroom and a shower that doesn't have a toilet in it that we're able to verify. We can't decide on it today.
Councillor Smythe.
I would agree with that.
It is proposed that we defer for further information. Would anybody have to make any other proposition? Councillor Jones.
I'm sorry, I have a question that's arisen from the proposition, if that's all right.
Yes, go ahead, ask a question.
Maybe a legal question, if that's okay. Obviously, the policy is what it is. The upstairs looks like, I agree, it could well be quite a comfortable self-contained flat. If the owner is giving an undertaking that it's not a self-contained flat and it will be a kitchen accessible to everyone that lives in the property, or a kitchen lounge area, whatever, do we think, therefore, that this would then have grounds for appeal if we, where is the non-determination? Where are we on the timescales? Could they go straight for non-determination on this? I know that cases are quite delayed at the moment, or if we go for deferral today, to clarify the position Councillor Pitt's made, is the council going to be on terra firma there, that we're not going to end up facing an appeal on non-determination?
So in terms of whether this is in effect a flat, that would be a planning judgment, and obviously the application before you is that it is 1 HMO. I would caution against too much speculation about what could happen in the future. As Sim's already mentioned, if there were a future breach of planning control, it would be down to the council to enforce against that breach. It's not necessarily the case that this committee can predict that happening. The officers have reached a recommendation whereby they believe that the flat is not so separate that it should be construed as a separate C3 dwelling. It is part of an HMO. That is the position that they've offered to you in their professional view. But of course it is open to you to depart from that.
So in answer to my question, which you haven't answered, would we be subject to a non-determination appeal, because it looks like the last date for determination was actually December. This was submitted 5 months ago for an HMO conversion, and are we therefore opening ourselves up for an automatic appeal from here, which means this committee won't get a say on it again, potentially?
The answer to that question lies with my colleagues in planning, who will have negotiated potential extensions to the deadline for determination.
I think we've agreed an extension of time till tomorrow.
Councillor Smythe?
I was just going to say that if we do agree to defer, and I think you should be able to, I hope you can negotiate that, because the plans are inadequate for us to make a proper decision. We'd also need to look at the location of the 2 bathrooms that could end up serving that number of people. I've said before in these meetings that I wouldn't really be happy going through a place where people were cooking breakfast and potentially sitting eating it in order to have a shower or go to the loo at a first thing in the morning, for example. And also I do think it's an odd location for a bathroom at the top if there are people who, even if it isn't a separate flat, kind of rather see them as their own because they live on the top floor. So I think there are further questions about the bathrooms and whether they've got loos in that we just don't have enough information on.
Councillor Pitt and Councillor has proposed, Councillor Smythe has seconded that we should defer this for detailed further information. Before I put that to the committee, would you please be explicit for the minutes? Sorry?
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I was indicating to make a comment.
My apologies.
That's okay. Yeah, I mean, I think this planning application is fairly pragmatic. Now, years ago, not to go into too much detail, one of the reasons why I quit this committee was because some of the questions just felt really inane and actually not of a standard that would be expected for a city council committee to be putting forward certainly an image to show that development is open. And so therefore, I think while HMOs can't always be perfect, and we've actually seen quite a lot of good HMO applications coming forward in recent times, I think getting help whether a room is determined to be a flat, when the officers have given us advice that a further planning application would be required around that. Therefore, I would be minded to support this actually, and would support the officer's recommendation if there was a seconder.
Councillor New, Gemma, you second that?
Yeah.
Right. Councillor Pitt?
Okay, so the just for parking the suspicions for the flat, we don't currently know which rooms would be used for dual occupancy, and we do have standards around bathroom provision. We don't know if there are 2 WCs to serve up to 8 people. We cannot vote it through on that basis because we will be breaching our own standards. Are we able to apply a condition to say that permission is granted with the condition that there is a second WC available in the shower room, should it be that the 4 rooms which do not have ensuite facilities are licensed for dual occupancy? Because that's actually the issue here. If they can't, all of the rooms qualify, but they won't all be used for dual occupancy, will they? So without knowing which ones will be, we don't know whether it meets the requirements or not, is the summary of this. But can we put a condition that should the 4 rooms that don't have en suites require that second WC to exist in that downstairs shower room, because they're dual occupancy, that will be implemented by private sector housing? Because if not, there is 1 bathroom and 1 toilet for 4 double bedrooms, and that doesn't comply.
Can I have a comment from the officers on that observation, please?
Chair, while the officers are conferring, it might be helpful for me to say I would support putting a condition on the whole package of occupants and suitable lavatory and washing facilities as a sweeping condition. But if they can come up with satisfactory solution to that, I would be happy to go with it as a condition.
Mr. Manley.
Speaking to my legal colleague, I think the situation is that if you were uncertain as to whether or not there was a provision of the WC and that's not shown on plan, then the problem with conditioning something is that we have to be sure that that can actually be implemented, that there's ability to actually put the WC in the room in terms of its capacity. I think it's actually a situation where it would be more advisable to get a plan showing that, so that we can bring it back and actually you are content, rather than trying to put in a condition which may put a requirement upon the developer who can't meet that provision.
Councillor Stubbs.
I sympathise with that answer about conditions. We've seen any number of planning applications whereby the recommendation is to grant, is to give officers delegated power to approve, subject to. Now, it's usually to do with legal agreements and this sort of thing, or affordable housing numbers, or whatever. But I don't see, on the face of it, and at least it appears to me, we could do something similar here. We could make some sort of resolution to grant officers delegated power to grant permission subject to. Could we do that?
Whilst they think about it, Councillor Jones.
That's exactly what I was going to say. All we're trying to do is to ascertain that there is adequate toilet facilities, and this committee today could grant permission as per Councillor Pitt's request, which is to delegate authority to the planning officer, that as long as she is satisfied that there is that second toilet there, we're happy. And then it doesn't need to come back here with an amended drawing. She can be satisfied because that's the jurisdiction we've given her.
Councillor Pitt.
Yes, and completely. And Sim's comments about imposing a condition that can't be enforced, in this case that's the whole point of the condition, because if there aren't sufficient washroom facilities it fails the standards and shouldn't be allowed to go ahead anyway. So I don't think it actually, either of those solutions is fine by me. I just want to make sure that we don't end up with 8 people with 1 loo.
Right. I think it therefore calls upon the chairman to make, because I can overrule the 2 proposals should be made and put mine first. The proposal then would be that we give delegated power to the officers to approve this, having ascertained that there are adequate toilet facilities for the numbers of people and the numbers of double rooms in that property.
I don't think it's just toilets. I think it's the it's access to showers as well. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. We'll add that, toilets and bathroom facilities. Sorry?
Chair, we've already been advised that it does meet the bathrooms.
It does meet the bathrooms.
It's the toilets that are the issue.
Okay. So I put that from the chair. It doesn't need a seconder. Those in favour, please show. That is carried. Thank you. We now come to the
Should we run through that again? Sorry, but
You want to run through that again? Okay.
Proposed by the chair.
It is proposed by the chair.
You've already got 2 motions on the table. One
Yes.
to refuse, one to defer.
Yes. And I have over. Members, there is the question of whether under our standing orders the chairman may propose without there being a seconder. It is an open question, and so would Councillor Smythe be willing to second, just to make absolutely sure?
With pleasure, Chair.
Thank you. Now, with some relief, I think we come to number 10 Telephone Road.
The application seeks permission for the change of use from C4 HMO to a 7-person, 7-bedroom HMO. The application site comprises a 2-storey mid-terrace property located to the south of Telephone Road. The property sits flush with the highway, and therefore waste and cycle stores would be expected to be stored in the rear of a property, in the rear yard. The proposed layout details 7 bedrooms, all of which exceed the required standard. In addition, the communal facilities are considered acceptable for 7 people sharing and comply with the standards within the HMO SPD. It is noted at the time of the site visit a rear dormer and single-storey rear extension had been constructed. And there you can see them. There's the kitchen and a bedroom, so works were ongoing at the time of the site visit. And for a reason set out in the officer's report and in accordance with the HMO SPD, the property is considered to provide an adequate standard of accommodation for 7 people sharing and is therefore recommended for conditional permission.
Members, questions? No questions? Comment? Councillor Stubbs?
Happy to propose the report.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor Jones, you wish to comment?
Just a very small one, but it appears to be almost identical layout to the previous application, actually. They're very, very similar houses, and actually the room sizes look incredibly similar as well, actually. But anyway, it was probably an incendiary comment.
Councillor Pitt?
Yes, just briefly to say that it's disappointing that all the work that went in cross-party to get the SPD amended so that we would stop these constant over-intensifications in this part of the city, which I happen to represent, is not being able to stand up to scrutiny by the regional inspector, but it is what it is.
Sorry? Yes, Councillor Jones seconded Councillor Stubbs. If there's nothing else, we have Councillor Stubbs recommending the officer's report, officer's recommendation. Councillor Jones seconding. Those in favour, please show. Right, that is unanimous. Thank you. We now come to number 1 Darlington Road. We have a deputation from Mrs. Candy. If Mrs. Candy would come to the table, please. Number 1 Darlington Road. Can I have the officer's report, please?
The application seeks permission for a change of use from C4 HMO to a 7-person, 7-bed HMO. The application site relates to a 2-storey end-of-terrace property located to the north of Darlington Road. The property is set back from the highway by a front forecourt, which is used for waste storage. The proposed floor plans detail 7 bedrooms, all of which meet the size standards required. In addition, the proposed layout would provide adequate communal facilities for 7 people sharing, and as such accords with the HMO SPD. Again, at the time of the site visit, a rear dormer and single-storey rear extension had been constructed. At the time of the site visit, building works were ongoing internally, so it was difficult to get photos safely. However, for a reason set out in the officer's report and in accordance with the HMO SPD, the proposal is considered to provide an adequate standard of living for 7 persons and is therefore recommended for conditional permission.
Thank you. Mrs. Candy, you have 6 minutes to make your presentation to us.
Okay, I'd just like to pass these over to the planning committee members. If you could share one between two, that highlights some of the points that I want to make. Having seen the planning department's recommended conditional permission to grant this application, despite the number of objections raised, I'd like the planning committee to consider the conditions which have been put forward by various committees involved in the planning process and examine whether they actually provide realistic solutions to any of the objections that residents have raised, because frankly we think they don't. Policy PCS 20 of the Portsmouth Local Area Plan seeks to avoid concentrations of HMOs in the city as it creates an imbalance of populations and has a knock-on effect on the social cohesion of the community. The Council has therefore implemented certain directives to facilitate maintaining this balance, and the density of HMOs should not exceed 10% of the number of properties in a 50-metre radius. As you can see on the front, I've highlighted the area which covers a 50-metre radius. There's 62 properties and there are 11 HMOs, which works out to a density of about 18-19%. In Darlington Road alone, there is a 28% HMO density. Planning Department supports this application as a C4 licence is already in existence, allowing up to 6 people to share. Another additional person, they say, will not have a negative impact on the amenity of the neighbouring properties. On paper, this looks plausible, but the reality is that this HMO has never had more than 4 occupants. It simply wasn't big enough. If you look at page 2, you can see the original footprint of that property. There's never been any more than 4. It's usually only 3. The small bedroom that existed at the back was too small to house anybody. When you consider that there's a 7-bedroomed and 4-bedroomed HMO directly opposite residents in close proximity to these properties have to bear the brunt of these lifestyle differences. All the dark ones are HMOs. Number 2 is a 4-bedroomed one, and number 4 is a 7-bedroom one. I live in the red one, which is number 5. Number 2 has just come on the market. It's 4-bedroom HMO. Already there's developers going in there, so I'll probably be back again in a few months doing the same thing. I've looked at it time and time again, and we're not just adding one person, so this makes a bit of a mockery of these planning rules. Having looked at similar applications for sui generis classification in this area, there's a distinct and worrying trend emerging. Like Darlington Road, most of these houses are small terraces. Talbot Road, Telephone Road, Hudson Road, they're all small family homes. They're not Victorian villas. The Article 4 of the directive is supposed to prevent an increase in HMO numbers in areas of high density, but it's ineffective in dealing with community imbalances when you allow developers to expand these properties upwards and backwards. It appears to be a method to circumvent the Article 4 directive by stealth. It results in further increases in the HMO population without actually increasing the number of HMOs. It's not the HMOs that cause imbalances, it's the number of people that's actually in them that cause imbalance in populations. I think according to the National Planning Policy Framework, local planning authorities have the power to refuse permitted development rights, which is what these developers are using to actually expand these properties. And local councils, to my knowledge, can refuse them if it means that it protects the local amenity and the well-being of an area. And if Portsmouth Planning is serious in its commitment to maintain balanced communities, perhaps they should adopt a more robust approach to developers who use this method to overdevelop small properties in order to double their occupancy. Other arguments that have been put forward to support this is living next to a 7-bedroomed HMO is considered to be no different to living next door to a large family. This is ludicrous. I mean, hundreds of lobbies, residents' lobbies, HMO lobbies, know that this statement is not true, because in families there's management, there's organisation to take care of noise nuisance, rubbish disposal, traffic problems, and that's not happening in HMOs. The same organisation ability doesn't exist. Other environmental comments are placing 360 litre bins to increase to deal with the increase in the population. This doesn't actually work because you have to have someone that assumes responsibility for emptying them and for recycling and for sorting their rubbish, putting them out on time, not leaving them on the street. So again, we end up with rubbish in forecourts and all over pavements. At the moment, we've got a double mattress that has been going up and down the road for the last week, more than a week, nearly 2 weeks now. It just moves up and down the road, then it's not cleared from forecourts. It's not fair. We pay our council tax and we should be able to live in a road that's not an eyesore.
Coming to the end of your 6 minutes.
Sorry, okay. There's a lot of other things that I need to cover about noise complaints. It's not a true reflection of what happens. That the Environmental Health said there's only ever been 17 noise complaints. We don't actually complain every time something arises. It's not practical. We talk to the people that occupy these properties and try to sort it out amicably. It doesn't mean to say it doesn't exist. In view of the fact that the Planning Committee is failing to recognise the solutions that they put forward, they do not actually address the issues raised in residents' objections and are therefore not fit for purpose. They do not work in accordance with policy PCS 20 of the Portsmouth Local Development Plan, i.e. reducing imbalances in populations within the community. And then I think that an application for the sui generis licence on this property should be refused on these grounds. There is areas that I haven't covered, which is parking.
Thank you very much. I think, Mrs. Candy, as the chairman of this committee, I have sat on a large number of these, and it is very difficult to persuade the Planning Inspectorate, which is the government body which oversees planning, that switching from a C4 to a sui generis HMO does constitute an increase in the number of HMOs. And so the 10% rule is something which we would like to, we do apply to new applications for any form of HMO. But for a transition from C4 to a sui generis HMO, we have been overturned at our expense by Her Majesty's Planning Inspectorate sufficient number of times that we are very wary on this. I have to inform you of that because it's only fair that you should know what the situation is, and that the costs of Her Majesty's Planning Inspectorate are not low.
Can I just comment? I've read your planning, your minutes of your meeting, and I don't think that's justification for allowing this to continue. Someone needs to speak to us. You know, cost doesn't come into it. This is our community, and we have an entitlement to enjoy a quiet, respectful community. And money shouldn't come into it.
Madam, it is not the matter of cost. It is the matter that we are overturned by Her Majesty's Planning Inspectorate on every one that we have has gone to appeal, where we have said, well, it's in a 10% area, so we cannot allow it to happen. We are overturned time and time again, and it would be foolish of us not to be aware of that.
But that's not answering. That's not a solution. Just saying you can't do anything about it. You should be able to do something about it. You can do something about it. The Article 4 directive says you can actually do something about it.
Councillor Jones.
I mean, whilst we're not here to have a conversation per se, I empathise very much with what the lady's saying, and actually it must seem, from a member of the public looking at what we're doing here, extremely frustrating, because the Article 4 direction is written in a way that actually it can be interpreted in several ways. It's not a perfect piece of prose that you read.
choose to interpret
but
in
what
one
I would
way.
say is
Please
that
let Councillor Jones finish.
what I would say is that Councillor Hugh Mason knows the policy extremely well, as do I, and other members of the committee. This requires a change of legislation nationally by the housing minister to empower us to do what you, because we want to do the same as you. We don't want to keep having mass overcrowding and mattresses dumped in streets and landlords that don't look after properties. We don't want our residents living in substandard properties where they only have one toilet for 10 people. You know, we want people to live in good quality homes. Unfortunately, our hands are tied by national legislation, and when I was in charge of setting the policy for HMOs in the city, we revised it about 10 months ago, and we pushed it as far as we could with barristers' advice to strengthen our hand around this whole principle of the 50-metre radius, the 10, and we were given, and I spoke to the barrister myself, and we were given very specific advice that if we push it any further, we will just get everything overturned, and our original Article 4 direction that was set up by the Liberal Democrats going back 6-7 years ago would actually fall completely. We would have weakened Port City Council's position. So actually, this campaign is really one to take to our members of Parliament across the whole country, because it really is them putting pressure on the housing minister for the housing minister to change the policy nationally, and then councils will say, hurrah, we can do what we want to do. Unfortunately, the planning inspectorate, which is a government quango, supersedes us, as Councillor Hugh Mason has said. Sorry, Councillor Mason.
Thank you. Councillor Pitt, you wish to make a comment?
Yes, just to support the comments that Councillor Jones has made, and this is not as an issue, regardless of when we're deciding on planning committee, as something that we've debated in the council. It has been something that all of the councillors have supported. Councillor Tom Wood worked with Councillor Jones on this, so you had the overwhelming majority of the councillors saying that we wanted to stop this from happening because we all know it's wrong. And the argument against it is, well, it's only 2 or 3 extra people, but actually, if all of the HMOs within the circle on your house had 3 extra people, it's 54 extra people within a 50-metre radius. So we know exactly what the issues are. It's not acceptable. Whenever I come and talk to residents in the ward, because I represent your ward, that we get the same comment over and over and over again. And it's not about being anti-HMO, it's certainly not about being anti-student, it's about protecting mixed and balanced communities. We all want to do that. At the moment, we are powerless to stop it, which is incredibly frustrating for us.
Why don't you tell us that when you ask us to vote, instead of telling us that that's what you will do?
I don't think we can have a general conversation at this point. Councillor Smythe.
I was going to say that I fully support everything that's been said and done on this. I do think we do have a small and maybe unlikely to succeed opportunity to look at our specific planning requirements when we do the local plan, and that might be a time when residents can express their view, and we can see if we can tighten up in a way that would be supported by the planning inspectorate. Although I don't hold out enormous hope for that, but we do have an opportunity, and I have fully in sympathy with residents who have to put up with this.
Members, I think it was important to make those points, and thank you very much for making them. I think we now need to turn to the specifics of number 1 Darlington Road. Are there any questions on the specifics of number 1 Darlington Road? Well, one from the Chair. We have the environmental health comments about noise and a recommendation for sound insulation to be fitted. Can I have a comment from the officer on whether this, in the circumstances, would be a reasonable condition?
Yes, that is reasonable, and we could apply that condition if required to do so.
Questions from other members? Comments from members? I would take Councillor Pitt first and then Councillor Stubbs.
The inquiry that you just made, Chair, was something I was going to comment on because I thought it was that it would be appropriate in this instance, and I would just support that being added as a condition. We are where we are with this. We've done our very best to get the policy changed. We thought we thought we'd scored a success with it. We started to implement it as we told the residents that we would, and unfortunately it's fallen down. So we have no other alternative than to grant permission for this, as much as we all would like to see it refused.
Councillor Stubbs.
I'm not quite sure now from the debate that we've had whether anyone's moved this report yet, but if not, I'm happy to do so. Like other members of the committee, I very much sympathise with the point that Mrs. Candy and indeed other residents and other applications have made. However, the Planning Inspectorate has effectively determined that our policy on larger HMOs is in conflict with national policy and cannot stand. And this means we've lost no end of appeals, and I am not just 80 or 90% sure we'd lose an appeal if we lost this. If we refuse this, I'm 100% sure. And for that reason, I think that the only thing we can do is to approve it today.
Would this be subject to the condition on...
I'm happy to accept the condition.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor New, then Councillor Smythe.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Councillor Smythe? Okay. Any further comments? Subject to a condition of the implementation of sound insulation.
Shall I give you some wording?
Yes.
I would suggest that the condition goes along the lines of that prior to the first occupation of the development hereby approved, details of sound installation shall be submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority and implemented in accordance with such approved plans. Is that okay?
A downside better than I would have put it.
He's right.
Oh, I know he's right, but that's beside the point. We are where we are. Councillor Stubbs has proposed. Councillor New, Robert New, has seconded. Can I see those in favour? That is unanimous. To the first pigeon loft, which I can recall coming up for planning application in my time on this committee. So I'm looking forward to this one in a way in which I didn't look forward to the last four things we have discussed.
Chair, it's not a sui generis planning loft, is it? The pigeon loft, is it?
Yes, hollow laughter.
How many pigeons?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members.
We do have an objector, Mrs. Musselwhite.
Oh, yeah,
If
sorry.
Mrs. Musselwhite would come to the table, if you please. Can I have the officer's report, please? Members, I have been informed that the applicant also wishes to speak. He is not on the list of deputies. Are you happy to have a deputation from the applicant as well? Yes. Okay. The applicant, if you would come to the table, please. I must say that this report contains one of the more interesting statements which I have seen in a report. A pigeon loft, it says, a pigeon loft is used to house pigeons. So, members, now you know what a pigeon loft is for. Can I have the officer's report, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The application site is located within a primarily residential area that is characterised by a variety of semi-detached properties. The dwelling has a significant rear garden with a width of 10 metres and a depth of 25.5 metres, giving it an approximate area of 230 metres squared. The above slide highlights some images of the site. Is located on the western side of Station Road, north from its junction with Grove Road, and relates to a detached bungalow. The application seeks retrospective planning permission for the construction of a pigeon loft to its rear garden. The existing pigeon loft has a mono-pitched roof, achieving a maximum height of 3.1 metres, a width of 12.2 metres, and a depth of 3.1 metres. It is finished with a black felt roof, timber board with varnished external walls, and a raised timber trellis to the front and side. Following the completion of the officer's report, the applicant has since indicated that they want the scheme to be judged on its original design, as including the trellis at the top, and that gives it a maximum height of 3.1, which is a bit different from the committee report. While the proposal was amended to reduce its scale and bring it closer to the requirements of permitted development, it is not considered that the trellis is significant enough to change the officer's recommendation. The outbuilding is located in the rear of the property's curtilage and features substantial height and width. The application site has a sufficient rear garden to accommodate this without being completely over-dominated. While the outbuilding is a significant addition to the rear garden, it is conceded that if the loft was repositioned 0.5 metres to the south and east and the trellis was removed, it would not need planning permission. As part of the application process, environmental health were consulted due to concerns that were raised by neighbouring residents about possible health risks of the pigeon loft. The view taken by environmental health was that the explicit legislation is likely to provide adequate protection in respect to such concerns, and therefore providing protection through the planning regime is unjustified. Explicit legislation for any noise or odour can be dealt with as a statutory nuisance as defined in the Environmental Protection Act 1990, section 79, and any problems caused by rodents can be dealt under the Prevention of Damage by Pests Act of 1949. As such, no conditions have been imposed in respect to environmental health, and no objections were received from them. The impacts on the dwelling to the north is mitigated due to the loft's placement away from the immediately usable garden area, about 13 metres away, as well as existing outbuildings at this residence. The pigeon loft has an appropriate placement within its curtilage with a significant separation distance of approximately 6 metres from the garden's southern boundary. This distance mitigates the impacts of the scheme on the neighbouring occupiers to the south. It is still visible from these neighbouring properties, however, it is not considered to present any substantial impact on these residents through a loss of light, increased sense of enclosure, or a loss of privacy. So, taking into consideration the design of the proposal and its limited impacts on the surrounding properties and the provisions of the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order, it is considered that the development would be in accordance with Policy PCS 23 of the Portsmouth Plan. Thank you.
Right. I will take the deputies in the order in which they applied to give you deputation. So I will first hear Mrs. Musselwhite and then Mr. Gladman. Ms. Barrett. Sorry? Barrett. Mr. Barrett. Sorry, if Gladman is your solicitor or something. Okay. Mr. Barrett. Mr. Anthony Barrett. So, Mrs. Musselwhite, you have 6 minutes.
Hello. Right. The pigeon loft, as you can see, is at the bottom of my garden and faces directly at my house. It's extremely unsightly to us. We've lived in our house for nearly 40 years and always enjoyed our lovely garden and our lovely view. It affects us more than any of our other neighbours because it is directly at us. And it is the complete width of the back of our garden and approximately 50 foot from our back door. It's very dominating from all the windows at the back of our house, and it can be seen from the beginning of Grove Road and the end. We previously had a lovely view from all aspects of the back of our house and garden, but it's now obscured by the incredibly large loft. And to make matters worse, there are railings or a fence and a spike that runs all along the top of it, which makes it even worse. Not forgetting the pigeons that we will constantly see flying around, sitting everywhere and everything that goes with them. I think because of its position to us, facing directly at us, it makes the situation worse. Pigeons are surprisingly noisy, and it is all emphasised so much more because of its position to our property. Maybe if it faced his own property and the pigeon flied at his property, it might not be quite so bad. I really don't think that anybody would be happy to see this at the bottom of their garden day in and day out. I would be happy for anyone to come and see what I am talking about. The loft has been built without consideration to anyone. How can it possibly be okay for someone to be able to keep such a large loft with all the pigeon when it affects other people so much? It is unacceptable and we object. Only last week on the BBC they reported about a child dying from a pigeon-related disease. It was also reported in our daily paper about a Fairham company, chemical company, who was tested and the risk to the humans. I have a new baby in our house and she'll be the right age to explore our garden in the coming summer. Where we always spend our time, I am very apprehensive now, and that's all apart from what we have to look at. It's just wrong that we will have to be looking at this forevermore. And that's all, thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Barrett.
Well, I don't know what to say really. I've had pigeons for 20 odd years. I'm not asking for permission for the pigeons, so they're there whatever, whether this loft gets permitted or not. But the loft itself is 2.5 metres and the trellis on the top is what's gone over. And I need that trellis so the birds don't sit about on roofs, they go straight into the shed and they don't land on the shed roof. As the lady was saying, they sit all over the place, which they doesn't. They go out, fly around, exercise and come back in. And that's about all I've got to say really. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Barrett. Members, questions? Councillor Stagg, then Councillor Robert New.
Can I ask, is it the entrance to the loft for the birds is facing the ladies' garden, not your own garden? Is that right? Can I ask directly?
Yes. Well, yeah, but I've got a fence there, and the ladies put a trellis on top, which is 2.9 metres. I measured it this morning, or 2.8 metres from one end. So she can't see it anyway, unless she goes upstairs and looks out of her bedroom window.
Can I ask, would it not be better for the loft to be facing the other way? I don't know much about keeping pigeons. I'm just thinking that from the point of view of being less affected by the birds flying in and out in the garden, if it was facing the owner's house, it might be less intrusive.
Can I have a comment from the officer on that question?
I suppose it would be less intrusive, but this was the application that was put forward and it's the one that has been judged on.
Councillor Robert New.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, it's more of a comment. Like you, this is probably the cutest application I think I've ever seen. And I would just really like to add my comment that actually it would be nicer to see more people across the city keeping things like pigeons. I think it's a great tradition actually, and there are areas like where I grew up where lots of people had them and it really brought communities together. And so while I do take that it's an annoyance for some people that may live in the local area, I would support this application. I think it's really quite nice.
Councillor Pitt.
Yes, just a clarification, Chair. Are we, could the officers just please give me a bit of clarity on this? If the wavy trellis on the top was removed, it would no longer require planning permission?
If the wavy trellis on the top was removed, it would be 0.1 metre, so it'd be 2.6 metres, but because it's within 2 metres of a neighbouring boundary, it would have to have the trellis removed and be moved 0.5 metres away from both, closer to the middle, and it wouldn't need planning permission.
But none of that would have any material change on anything, really, would it?
No, not really.
Councillor Smythe.
In the report, it's mentioned that there were previously pigeon lofts in the garden, and I just wondered what the position and size of those had been.
There was 2 separate ones in the same place, obviously with a gap between them, and then there was one next to the lady's house. So I had 3 separate pigeon lofts, but now I've contained everything in one loft, and it's self-clean and everything, and just press a button and it cleans itself out, you know. So that's why I wanted one long loft to have that self-cleaning.
And you've removed all the others there?
Yeah, the others are gone, yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? Right. Comments? Councillor Robert New has proposed the officer's recommendation. Councillor Jones.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. 3 comments. One of my comments was about the trellis, which I think does unfortunately add. Actually, I think it is quite an overburdensome impact on Mrs. Musselwhite's property. Retrospective applications to me are always slightly aggravating. There is a reason that we have planning system in place. It's, it doesn't take a genius to Google and work out if you need to. I want to do an extension on the back of my house. I've Googled it, I've looked at it. I need to do a planning application, and I'm in the process of doing that. So, you can work it out if you're unsure, or you pick up the phone and you ask the local authority. So, retrospective applications for me, I always judge it as if this was about to be built, because the fact it is already built for me is irrelevant, because it shouldn't have been without planning permission. So I want Mrs. Musselwhite to be clear that from my perspective, I'm judging this as if it was an application fresh, and the fact it's there doesn't sway me in any way, shape or form. Whether that's right or wrong, that's just the way that I view it. It is large. It's a very, very, very large pigeon loft. It's probably the biggest in Portsmouth, or certainly one of the largest, and largest I've ever seen in the city, because we don't have a lot of space in Portsmouth. It does have an impact on the neighbouring property. Having said that, unfortunately, through you, Chair, Mrs. Musselwhite, I don't see that if we refuse this today, unfortunately, back to the government's planning inspectorate, yes, it should be, if it was half a metre off that boundary into the centre of the garden, if the trellis was down and it was another 10 centimetres lower, unbelievably, something that size still wouldn't need a planning permission. So, on the basis that it's 10 centimetres too high and it's half a metre in a westerly direction, or whatever it is, but anyway, the point is that do I think that those 2 things will be strong enough if we gave a refusal today for the planning inspector to uphold our decision if Mr. Barrett was to appeal it? No, I don't. I think a planning inspectorate would say, on balance, we'll give Mr. Barrett the permission. So to protect another 15 grand's worth of public money being spent in us losing an appeal and us being fined, regrettably, I'm going to support it today. I'm sorry, and I do appreciate your position, but I don't think there's grounds for a refusal.
Councillor Stubbs, then Councillor Pitt.
I don't think I've ever seen a pigeon loft, so it might have been an interesting site visit. It is pretty. Obviously it's a unique application as far as this city is concerned, and I'm actually a little bit surprised that it would fall within permitted developments, because I thought it's sort of pseudo-agricultural almost, and so I would have thought that there would have been some limits around that, but the rules are what they are, and there was a pigeon loft there previously, and as has been stated, all you have to do is shave 10 centimetres off the top and move it slightly, which is obviously difficult, not actually achievable, but nonetheless, if it was moved slightly further, it would be outside of planning entirely anyway. So the detailed questions, that we could have about the principles of pigeon loss and so on, I'm sure we could debate that for hours, but it doesn't affect anything. I think that this should be approved, and I don't know if it's been seconded or not, but if it hasn't, then I'll second it, and if it has, I will shut up.
Councillor Pitt.
Yeah, I agree with the other comments. I agree with what Councillor Jones said about it's always disappointing when we don't get the chance to actually decide before something happens, because it is very frustrating that process isn't followed. But the only thing I could see as an outcome of this is that it might end up even nearer to the neighbour's property. So I don't see there's any benefit in that at all. So I'm happy to support it as well.
Well, the officer's recommendation has been proposed by Councillor New. It has been seconded by Councillor Stubbs. Can I see those in favour? Those against? Those abstaining? Thank you. You have your planning permission, sir, and next time, please consult us in advance, will you?
The loft is 2.5. I didn't realise the trans come into it.
Right, it does. Thank you very much. Is Councillor Darren Sanders here? Yes. Councillor Sanders, will you come to the table, please?
Can we have a break before we get to Parkston?
Sorry?
Can we have a break before we get to Parkston?
Before we get into Palmerston, yeah, we will. Believe you me, we will. I think that we have here 3 TPO requests. They are very much in the same location. The same principles would appear to apply. I am prepared to take them all together, but not to allow Councillor Sanders 18 minutes to speak on them. If I did, he would. Hello, Darren. Can I have the officer's report on these, please?
Chair, members, good afternoon. The 3 separate applications relate to 3 protected trees at 2921 Siskin Road and 4 Riegling Drive. And they are trees 23, 25 and 28 protected by Tree Preservation 184, which encompasses a tree line which formerly formed the boundary to the St James's Hospital playing fields. The playing field's been redeveloped now to form the area occupied by Marlbush Park, Siskin Road and Riegling Drive, and the boundary comprised mainly Lombardy poplar and willow trees. The subjects of these applications are located to the north of the properties at 4 Riegling Drive, 21 and 29 Siskin Road. And they can be seen in a slightly undersized and out-of-date aerial photograph, but the tree line is quite clear across the middle of the picture. 21 Siskin Road is marked by the red pin, and you can see the trees to the north of the properties. Between the properties and the tree line in Siskin Road is a large privately owned parking area for the residents, and the third tree is located in the rear garden at 4 Riegling Drive. The applicants seek permission to fell tree 25 to the left, tree 23 to the right, and tree 28 in the centre of the photograph. All 3 have recently been pollarded following an application to fell 2 years ago that was refused and dismissed by the planning inspectorate appeal. And we allowed the trees to be pollarded and quite heavily reduced in an attempt to prolong the life of the trees while retaining them at a size slightly more commensurate with the space available to them and at a safer size to the properties around them. Unfortunately, Lombardy poplar is it's a very short-lived tree. 100 years for one of these is probably well into old age. They generally last 50 to 75 years. They're fine planted as windbreaks at the edge of fields and open spaces, but I question their validity as a tree within a dense housing environment. The pollarding generally triggers dense regrowth in trees, which it did. Unfortunately, it additionally triggered dense regrowth from the rootstock. And across the area and the gardens at the properties now, we have baby poplar trees coming up all the tree off the roots, destroying tarmac, paved surfaces, gardens, and privately owned space. Technically, all of this is protected by the tree preservation order because it's part of the parent tree, which renders it a bit of a chore for the residents to manage. Consequently, if they wish to manage it by mowing it off, they need to submit a planning application. If they wish to treat it with glyphosate weed killer, there is a risk inherent in that the glyphosate will kill the root, the parent root, and increase chances of decay, which could then lead to failure of the main tree. So as a consequence, having attempted to retain the trees, we now left the owners stuck between a bit of a rock and a hard place in terms of management of the remaining tree. On my advice, the residents contacted an independent arboricultural consultant, Mr. Bernie Harbison, and the content of his tree management strategy report I accepted as part of this application. A practical permanent solution to the management and the cause of the damage and mitigation of the risk of failure can only be felling. Chasing out of larger roots, while possible, may result in stability problems for the parent tree. And just mowing off or pruning off the suckers is only a short-term fix, because as root girth increases with annual growth increment, new suckers will be produced, and any damage that is repaired now will recur within 2 years through redevelopment of the root system. Unfortunately, a lot of the hard surfacing in the area, which is blacktop tarmac, provides an ideal environment for roots to grow under, and they tend to proliferate beneath the tarmac because generally it is warm, condensation forms on the back of it, and as of course it's dark underneath it, and roots love wet, warm, dark places in which to grow. So unfortunately, I come to the conclusion that I have to accept the advice of Mr. Harbison, the arboricultural consultant, and that felling would be the best way to manage these trees, and we can condition their replacement with suitable species. I recommended a choice of 4 different species for replacement trees, from which the residents could then select a suitable specimen.
Thank you very much for that comprehensive report. Councillor Sanders.
Thank you, Chair, and I think if you'd have done the 3 things separately, I'd have repeated the same thing 3 times, hopefully in less than 18 minutes, and certainly I hope in less than 6. And then Mr. Knight's presentation explains why I honoured the request of the Milton Neighbourhood Forum and the community group Keep Milton Green to bring this here. The issues to me, and there are many issues around trees in Milton, which I'll come to in a second, but the issue here is really simple. This is an estate that was built 25 years ago. It was completed months ago, which is the section of Glebe Close that this particular committee accepted. But you have got an issue that because this is former playing fields, these trees do still exist and these trees still continue to cause issues. One of the reasons why the Forum and Keep Milton Green have asked me to bring this here is because there is a significant amount of anger within people within Milton, and I have to say, as Councillor Stagg well knows, in the rest of the ward that we're proud to represent, that we want to keep as many trees as possible. And any pollarding, certainly any, as they see it, destruction of trees will lead to problems, as Mr Knight well knows. In an earlier iteration of the development of 29 Siskin Road, there were death threats given to people who applied, something which Councillor Stagg and I thankfully got people to row back on once we discovered the truth, and the truth was conveyed to people. But that shows the level of anger at any loss of trees in this sensitive area. That's aided and abetted by the fact that the NHS at St James's, Councillor Stagg has tried to cut down healthy trees. And that has generated a level of mistrust amongst people within the North Milton, the wider Milton community, about the loss of trees, particularly on such a sensitive estate. And I think, for me, the issue is less around what the outcome is, but the fact that this is being done in the open. And I think this is the only way that we can reduce the mistrust, the massive mistrust that exists at the moment within the Milton community around anything that involves the loss of trees, particularly with the planning applications for St James's, which you may or may not see very soon. I can see both sides. Just as Councillor Stagg and I have seen both sides of the argument with regards to the recent loss of trees just off Tangier Road, where trees exist and they cause an issue, whether in that case it's the threat to humans walking underneath it, and in this case the issues Andy has rightly outlined around the road and around the trees themselves, and I can see both sides. These trees are dying, and these trees are causing significant numbers of issues. But also I can see the fact that losing trees, particularly in such a densely populated city as Portsmouth, where people are proud of their green spaces and want to keep their green spaces, is an issue of significant sensitivity. And that's why I wanted it to come here. Andy has outlined a balanced assessment that I hope members will take. My own preference would be to refuse it, but I fully understand, as Donna outlined for the previous application, that Her Majesty's Planning Inspectorate may take a slightly different view of this. And the key thing for me is this is done in the open, so we can have a detailed and open discussion around what can be done, and hopefully a decision that will balance up the relevant needs. So Hugh, I believe that's less than 6 minutes, certainly less than 18, and thank you very much, colleagues.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Questions from members, please. Councillor Stagg.
Can I be assured that the trees that have been cut down will be replaced? I mean, I know you've got a list there, Andy, which is good, but is there any means of ensuring that those are actually put in? Because I think that's important.
So part of the process for conditioning the replacement planting the trees, Councillor, we also notify planning enforcement. So we put a chop date on for your tree will be planted by. If at that point the tree has not been planted, planning enforcement get turned loose and ensure the trees are planted, shall we say.
Councillor Pitt.
Thank you. And just linking to the question Councillor Stagg's just asked, are we able to condition the size or maturity of the replacement tree? This is something I've become intimately acquainted with over the last 7 months, and I've had to make sure that where we were doing tree replacements and there was known vandalism because people didn't want replacement trees outside their windows, that we've had to take quite extreme measures to protect the replacements that have gone in. So are we able to put a condition around size and age of replacement?
Yes, Councillor. Generally, we condition that replacement planting should be of the nursery specification heavy standard, which will give you a tree of approximately 3.5 to 4 metres in height and approximately 15 to 16 centimetres in girth at breast height, which is 1.5 metres from the floor.
Thank you.
Councillor Stubbs, were you indicating? No. All right. What would be the lifespan of the replacement trees which you are recommending of each of the 4? Would they have a longer lifespan than those of a poplar?
Yes, Councillor. I specifically looked at species that were of a similar form in growth habit to the poplar, so they will give you a similar shape on the horizon once they develop, but all of them will have a greater longevity.
Right. And would they automatically have tree preservation orders placed upon them so that there is no danger of them being suddenly taken down in the night?
I am currently in the process of reviewing all our tree preservation orders, so if these are replaced by the end of the next growing season, so approximately 12 months' time, yes, they will be protected by the tree preservation order.
Thank you. Councillor Smythe, you had a...
I was just going to observe and perhaps more on the passing of time in saying I believe this is the row of trees that were planted so beautifully by Edward King in his paintings of the farmland at St James's. But it does remind us that nature takes its course, and these trees do seem to be at the end of their life. And I would like us to move to support the motion, the recommendation.
Councillor Pitt?
I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, but I was quite early on in my tenure as Cabinet member faced with a very large group of very angry residents in Bransbury Park because there was tree works about to happen. So what I asked Simon to do was to notify the ward councillors in writing and to post notices on any trees where felling was proposed to make sure that the ward councillors were a point of communication and that the notices on the trees gave advance notification of the felling to try to mitigate some of this public feeling of distrust that was going on. So we're doing that in parks. Is it possible to do that with these, Andy? And would that be something we'd need to do by petition, or would we just request that it happens?
So, as a consequence of a planning application being made, we put planning notices out. They're a green waterproof notice, cable tied to the nearest lamppost or whatever, with my contact details on, telephone and email address. So the information is already out there because the planning notice details the work proposed. If you wish me to contact the ward councillors and put it out there in a separate notice, yeah, absolutely, no problem.
So yes, that would be helpful. And there is a difference between putting a notice up to say you're going to do something and it actually happening.
Yeah.
So what we've been doing is actually strapping notices to the trees so that people are aware. And I know this might sound a bit silly and a bit over-egging, but we've actually had a couple of incidents where we've had residents potentially throwing themselves in the way of very dangerous equipment because people get so emotional about these things, they don't think about their own safety, and I just want to avoid any of those incidents. And then I was present with the chainsaw and the person, and it was, believe me, very scary.
Councillor Donna Jones, you...
It's a comment. Are we on to comments now?
Yeah.
Thank
yes,
you.
let's hear all the comments.
Yeah, when they were cut down in my road, you had to do some felling of some diseased trees. We all got letters through our doors anyway, but I wasn't sure if that happened as a matter of course. My comments are, first of all, the point put by Councillor Pitt about the what kind of trees go back. I think they should be mature big trees because it'll either come out of his budget or Councillor Stagg's budget. No, only joking. I love the chop date. That's a new phrase on me today for tree felling. But anyway, I'm happy to propose the application.
Councillor Stagg.
Can I just make another comment? It would be very useful if the ward councillors knew, because when they were cutting down the trees in Baffins, we had no idea. So we had to sort of fend off residents who were saying that they were murdering the trees and goodness knows what, and we had no idea where the trees were that were being murdered or why.
Yeah, problem I have, councillors, is that the trees being worked on in Bransbury Park are hours being undertaken by our contractors, so I know when the work's going to be done. These are privately owned trees, and the work will be undertaken by private contractors over whom I exercise absolutely zero control. So I can only comment that these trees will be felled in due course. But from a planning consent point of view, they get 2 years to do the work in.
Councillor Stubbs.
Just a comment really that there is and never has been a war on trees, and that but there are situations such as this where circumstances change, and that it is necessary sometimes to remove previously protected trees, and I think we've got to be pragmatic about this, and I said there never has been a war on trees.
Okay, we have a proposal. Do we have a seconder? We have 3 seconders. Who was first?
I didn't notice they were very
Sorry?
fast.
Right. I am told that legally we have to go through each application in turn. In which case, can I have a proposer for the application on 29 Siskin Road? Councillor Smythe, seconded by Councillor Stubbs. Those in favour, please show. Can I have a proposer for the proposal for 21 Siskin Road? Proposed by Councillor Gemma New, seconded by Councillor Robert New. Can I see those in favour? Thank you. We have a proposal for 4 Reedling Drive. Can I have a proposer? I think that was Councillor Stubbs, seconded by Councillor Robert New. Those in favour, please show. All of these were unanimous. Thank you very much, Councillor Sanders. It is now 3 o'clock. Members have been going for 2 hours. There is a substantial and somewhat contentious issue coming up for 112 Palmerston Road. Would you like a short break before this is heard? Members, our 15-minute break. Please do not use your microphones during the break because the cameras will still be on.
Chair, we're now going to have a 15-minute break and then a bunch of us can't be here for the other item, but we've all got to come back for the end one. Is that right?
Yeah, well, my
Okay.
son's
Or shall we say, come back if you possibly can, because we need as much wisdom on this as we can get. Members. Sorry. Councillor Robert New, Councillor Donna Jones, Councillor Steve Pitt, and Councillor... Yeah. Yes. So, Luke Stubbs, yes. Have all stated that they believe they have sufficient friendship with, understanding of, working with either the applicants or the objectors, that they feel that they cannot make an independent decision on this, a clear independent decision. Therefore, the four of us here constitute, and we are just quorate, constitute the planning committee for this item. Members may recall having looked at this item sometime before, in 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017 and 2018. We now come for our annual visit. I would therefore like the officer to give the officer's report.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully this may be the last visit. Let's see. So this is an application at 112 Palmerston Road in Southsea. It's a food and drink premises at the southern end of the High Street. There it is shown in red, the white roofed building there on the corner of Palmerston Road and Auckland Road West. As the Chairman has remarked, the application or similar applications have been knocking around for 3 to 4 years, and members know or have seen in the report there's a series of refusals based on the concerns about windows opening outwards over the pavement and obvious risk to public safety. That perhaps is, well, that is one of the points of objection. We've received now 6 letters from, I think, 4 individuals or addresses, including the one we received post-publication of the reports, so that was set out in the SMAT report for you. So the objections centre around risk to health and safety, noise and disturbance from open windows with the food premises, precedent issues, whether or not the development is unauthorised, the fact that there was a previous dismissal at appeal, is this a vexatious application, the rear courtyard needs tidying up. All these issues are addressed in the report, and with respect to the extra comments received, apparent contradiction in the objector's eyes between issuing a planning contravention notice or an enforcement notice at the same time as the council recommending it positively in front of you today. And lastly, the objector notes that the applicants are also the organisation behind or with some connections to the Victorious Festival, and not wishing to see any bypassing of due process. On that last point, this is an application. The applicant, it doesn't matter who they are, it is an application that will be determined on its planning merits alone. On that point, as I've already mentioned, the principal issue, I think, is the highway safety matter. So this relates to windows on both elevations opening outwards. These large windows, you can see the one towards the left-hand side, I think, is open. That's the Auckland Road frontage, where there is a slightly narrower pavement, and residents along the road to the west, or the left, as you look at it there. Then that is the slightly wider pavement onto Palmerston Road, and the same windows, the same sets of windows that can open outwards. And you can just about make out in dashed in green on the plan there the windows opening outwards, 2 sets on Palmerston Road and further sets along Auckland Road West. To be clear, the windows would open out through 180 degrees to be fixed flush to the open to the front of the elevation there. The applicants have submitted their procedures on how to open the windows, which is set out in the report in front of you. In very brief summary, rather than just having someone inside opening it and throwing it open, and then perhaps going outside to secure it shut, hopefully, they would make sure that there are 2 members of staff, one inside opening the window, only after the member of staff outside has checked the pavement both ways and possibly even traffic on Auckland Road West to say, yes, it's okay to open, we haven't got anyone approaching, and to open it and to secure it. Members of staff would not be allowed to do this operation until they've practiced it and the manager's made sure that they know what they are doing. So members will have noticed from the report in front of you that we had the refusal, that's at the top of page 52. It says 25th of September 2018, I've just noticed that, it was 2017 actually, just a typo there. Like the two previous refusals, that was refused because of highway safety concerns. That application was appealed to the inspectorate, and the planning inspector's decision is appended at the back of the agenda after this report. The inspector is quite clear that there is one issue still, that of highway safety or pedestrian safety. The inspector was aware of the various procedures and so on, and I think it's fair to say the only reason the inspector dismissed the appeal was because, in his words, it was unclear from the submissions and his observations as to whether or how such locks could be designed and fitted to fulfil the function of keeping the windows open. The inspector was concerned that even if the windows are opened carefully and with procedure, how do they remain open and not swing back over the highway or are dislodged intentionally by someone or unintentionally? That is the last remaining issue. So the applicants have gone away and actually installed the mechanisms, which is shown here on the projector, one of those window type locks with a barrel key, a fluted key. So you lock it on the inside and unlock it. There it is being unlocked and opened. This is where the procedure would come in, that the person opening it on the inside would only do so once the member of staff outside says it is safe to do so. And it swings all the way around, and now, this is now looking on the outside as the window is swung into place, and this is the new bracket and bolt that the inspector had not seen. And there it swings into place and the bolt is locked and the key will be removed. And there it is, secured shut. So that was the issue that the inspector was concerned about. That is the solution, straightforward. So to that end, subject to the conditions that the procedures are followed, as I've outlined to you, and that the window is either open fully or shut fully and not overhanging the highway at any other point, that is a clear recommendation to approve finally and hopefully the application for you.
Sue Lloyd and Peter Cairns, I would be grateful if you could come to the table. You have 6 minutes each to make a representation.
Right. What do I press?
You press the single button on the right-hand side. Right-hand side.
Right, okay. Here we are again, actually. This is, I think, my third deputisation? Third time here, actually, going through exactly the same information that I've gone through before, actually. I live with my young family in Auckland Road West. We go up and down this pavement, sometimes in the summer, numerous times a day. I've got children 6 and 8, and they're actually head height with the bottom of the window. In the last planning meeting that I came to, Councillor Frank Jonas actually was chairing it, and he actually said, I don't want to see this at planning again, but here we are again. As the planning officers quite rightly said, it's failed at every attempt in this planning committee. I just want to read the minutes of the last meeting, because in my mind nothing has changed. And these were the members' comments from the minutes of the last meeting. Members felt that the pavement on Palmerston Road is wide enough to allow pedestrians to pass whilst the windows are open with a secure locking mechanism. However, the pavement on Auckland Road West is too narrow for pedestrians to safely pass with outward opening windows. Members also noted the concerns raised in the deputations that the window operating procedures are not being adhered to, with reports of people hanging out of windows to close them, causing a risk to passing pedestrians. The last time we were here, we went through this It was actually, I believe, a 3-man window operating procedure where the duty manager was going to be inside, somebody else outside on the pavement, and then somebody operating the window mechanism. These are about 4-foot-high windows swinging into the path of a narrow pedestrian, less than a week after I was here, round a blind corner. And if you flick back to the diagram, I can show you how it's a blind corner. Completely blind corner, walking along it at pace from Palmerston Road onto Auckland Road West. Can I see the diagram on the PowerPoint, please? My husband, we just had lunch in Sopranos. My husband's 6'2". We went round the corner. There was a waitress on her own. This is less than a week than the meeting. On her own, not even a cursory glance up and down the road, Palmerston Road. It's actually the diagram, you know, the diagram, the map. There wasn't even, can you see that sort of angle that's so basically you're walking at speed round that corner on the left-hand side. You cannot see, you have no visibility of the windows opening or closing. There was a waitress, and I've got a photo here if you want to see it. I can pass my phone around. The waitress solely swinging the window shut into the path, and literally my husband must have missed it by 2 seconds. He had to jump into the road, and if that had been one of my small children running around the corner, I have no doubt that they would have probably been killed by that window. She didn't even look, not even a cursory glance up and down. So it's great for people to sit here and say, yeah, there's going to be SOPs. On a busy summer night, do you really think with the churn of staff you have in places like this, that they're going to free up 3 members of staff to do that? So as a committee, you're putting your blind trust in an organisation that has failed at planning at every attempt. We categorically said last time we don't have an issue with opening of the windows at the front, and the recommendation as well was to go back, amend your planning application and resubmit it. They didn't. It's the arrogance of this organisation that they don't even bother to send anybody here. It's this cavalier attitude that Meat and Barrel seem to have for public safety. So it's fine to say there's going to be SOPs, but they will not be followed because they weren't followed after the last time we discussed this. And then they say, oh, well, it wasn't, it was just in our proposal. Well, safety should be at forefront of their mind, public safety. So as soon as they suggested it, they should have followed it, not have to be mandated by this committee as part of planning. But like I say, they failed at every single attempt, and actually it's whether you as a committee are willing to put your blind trust in Meat and Barrel to follow these safety procedures, because if not, you have got 5-foot glass windows swinging completely onto a pedestrian footpath, which is quite narrow. And I think that concludes.
Mr. Kearns.
So I'll read from my script. Meat and Barrel have repeatedly failed to comply with planning conditions placed on them. In February 2015, conditional permission was given to the retrospective planning application stating that any outward opening windows should be fixed shut within 6 weeks. 4 years have now passed. A further 3 planning applications, and the planning inspectorate have refused the application, and an enforcement notice was issued last November. The windows continue to be able to be opened. Planning application 17/01014/PLA Reg, submitted in June 2017, contained a window opening procedure dated January 2017, which was incorporated into staff health and safety training. The highway engineer's report states that the procedure mitigates any risk to the public. In August 2017, a neighbour was almost hit in the face by a window being swung shut from inside by a member of Meat and Barrel staff. The planning inspector's report states that the procedure was not in force on the day of this incident. They cannot pick and choose which days they wish to apply their policy. The pavement on the south elevation in Auckland Road West is only about 1.5 metres wide. armrested blind and use a white cane, the building line is used as a primary navigation aid. As a resident of Auckland Road West, I walk past these premises at least twice a day, often more. As a blind pedestrian, anything projecting from the windows present a hazard. When the windows are open, I have encountered arms and plants projecting out of the window. On one occasion, a customer inside was hanging onto his bicycle outside. The outward opening windows were refused as they are contrary to Portsmouth Plan policies PCS 17 and PCS 23. We also believe they are in breach of the Highways Act 1980, paragraph 153. Meat and Barrel have repeatedly failed to comply with the planning conditions over the past 4 years and have shown a total disregard for public safety. This application has been recommended for approval on the basis that the risk to pedestrians' safety has been mitigated by the adoption of the window opening procedure. Meat and Barrel have failed to adhere to this procedure. I question whether they have sufficient appropriately trained staff available to adhere to this policy. Pedestrian safety on the adjacent public highway was compromised. This application should be refused and the enforcement notice enforced. Windows should be permanently fixed shut. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cairns. Members. Councillor Stagg, then Councillor Smythe. Questions?
Can I ask, I don't know if anybody knows the answer to this, why the owners didn't change the windows? It would seem a lot simpler in the long run to have changed the windows. I don't know if these could, they look as if they're wooden, could be changed that they open inwards, rather than go through all this hassle, and they're still not compliant. Does anybody know the answer?
I don't, I'm afraid, Councillor. I don't know if there are any practical or technical impediments or if it's financial. I don't know.
Councillor Smythe.
Chair, I've got two questions and I'll ask them sequentially if that's all right, so as not to confuse them. The first question is, could we have the planning officer's professional opinion about whether or not the applicant would make another appeal if we refused it, and whether the appeal would be upheld? To the best of your knowledge. That's the first question.
Thank you. Might need to defer to the planning solicitor in terms of procedure, in terms of how the enforcement notice might fetter any potential appeal. But on the face of it, without the enforcement, certainly, if the application was refused, then there would be an appeal process. But to answer the next half of your question, would that appeal be upheld? Clearly, we don't think so as officers, for the reasons we've set out. And so partly to address the understandable concerns of the local residents, of course, about public safety, the inspector effectively has moved it on from that. The inspector felt that adherence to the window opening procedure could be secured by condition, which we have done, which would be sufficiently enforceable through any remotely recorded observations. So, notwithstanding the objectors' doubts about whether or not the company will adhere to those procedures, the planning authority has to give them the opportunity to do so when for the first time they are imposed by way of condition for the first time. So the inspector has moved it on to the one simple issue, as I outlined it previously. Is there a means of securing the windows open in place once they are opening, along with the procedure? And the answer is we have that lock now installed, which the officer has seen on site. So, subject to adherence to the procedures, the locking can be secured in place.
Sorry, can I add something?
No.
My next question is related to that, which is I want to know if you have tried to negotiate with the applicant about fixing closed the windows on Auckland Road West and allowing them to open on the street where there are already precedents and there are already windows open, and subject, I presume, to conditions that were on the opening hours for Meat and Barrel, which are not the subject of today. It would be difficult to have opening window hours for the front part of the building that couldn't be upheld. So my question is, have you posed to them a proposal to close it on Auckland Road West and to allow the windows to be opened on Palmerston Road, because I certainly feel very uneasy as a ward councillor there of approving a application that could result in serious injury to passers-by, and that is only going to occur on Auckland Road West, subject to the probabilities.
Thank you, Councillor. I don't have a long history of involvement with the site at all, so the short answer is I don't know if that's been negotiated. All I could do is speculate that the applicants potentially feel it's part of their offer to have these open windows. It's something you can see more often in these sorts of premises around the country. So I suspect they feel it's an important part of their offer. That may be by the by. Whether or not, members will have to decide whether or not they wish to, if they thought it was possible, to say no to the windows on Auckland Road West, but OK to them on Palmerston Road. That's up to members.
And we could do that by a condition, could we?
I think, Sim, we don't.
The application in front of us is the one to be determined. The planning inspector, when they made their decision, didn't identify or didn't single out any one particular frontage. So the applicant has responded to whilst it was a dismissal of appeal, there were comments made by the inspector who narrowed it down to one particular thing, which is the mechanism for opening and closing and securing them closed. It didn't identify one being more appropriate than the other. The application in front of us is actually to determine the application. If we were to impose a condition that would try to remove part of any permission, I think we'd be open to appeal against that for an unreasonable condition, because we'd effectively be derogating part of a permission.
I'd just like to say that we can see clearly that the pavement on Auckland Road West, which is essentially a residential road, is quite narrow. I live very near here, so I use this area all the time, although I've never been to Meat and Barrel. There is a street culture on Palmerston Road, and subject to the conditions on the opening and opening and closing procedure, I couldn't really say that wasn't acceptable. But I do think that if there's a serious concern, and there have been accidents on Auckland Road West, I would like to try and condition that, or negotiate further with them on this matter, because it's a serious matter on Auckland Road West, whereas I don't think it's a serious matter on Palmerston Road.
Councillor Stagg.
When was this locking mechanism put in place? And if it's been in for any length of time, have there been any reported near misses or something like that?
I believe it was put in place relatively recently, either before the application was submitted or soon after, so in recent months, i.e. the autumn, that's what I understand. I'm not aware of any reports since then, but I'd refer back to there hasn't been this procedure required by condition yet, and one would hope and expect that if and when it is required by condition, i.e. a formal decision, they will actually adhere to it.
Following on from that, what measures can be put in, if any, to ensure that procedure is followed? Because it's all very well putting it there, but unless you've got at least two people willing to do it, to carry it out, it's not going to work, is it?
No, so the applicants are well aware of that. It's their proposed procedure. It's not been imposed, they are proposing it. I think for a premises of this size, I assume there are always a number of staff on the premises, because of the number of people that could be served at any one point. And so going back to one of the earlier points from one of the speakers about being busy and so on, and staff numbers, I presume, particularly on the warmer evenings and so on, and the warmer days, that when the premises are open, fairly open early in the day, there will be enough staff, and B, they will open the windows, carefully following the procedures before they get too busy with all the patrons coming in.
Right, carrying on from there. Now, if somebody was to be injured, or hope not worse, where do we as a committee stand legally if we give approval? because we are representing the City Council, and I'm not sort of looking after my own skin here. It's actually the City Council, if we give approval to something that we're obviously not happy about. So.
Thank you. In terms of the council's responsibility, there wouldn't be any direct causation attributed to the council in terms of negligence for approving a planning approval in this fashion. What the council can perhaps do is consider other powers that it has under other statutory hats, such as the Highways Act, to look into, even if planning concerns were resolved, whether there were other outstanding statutory heads that we could take action against this particular proposed development, if that were the case.
Thank you. And do you know what these would be?
My understanding under the Highways Act is that doors should not be permitted to swing out over the highway. So that's something that we can look into through taking instructions from highways officers. But that's by the by as far as the planning is concerned. That's not material.
So that would be the civil enforcement officers, presumably, being asked perhaps to keep an eye on things?
That would be a good starting point, yes.
Councillor Smythe?
And that's also a building regulation, so it's hard to know how that got through. I think, though, that I would be still prepared to see a differential approach to Auckland Road West than I would from Palmerston Road. But it may be something to factor in thinking about a condition.
Well, questions from the Chair? First of all, taking Councillor Smythe's last point, I recognise that we might well be overturned were we to say that none of the windows on Auckland Road West could be opened under any circumstance. We have a problem. It does strike me, however, that the easternmost of those four sets of opening windows on Auckland Road West is potentially the most dangerous, since, as the deputy mentioned, people coming round the corner are walking straight into that area of window. Now, that area of that first set of windows does not open onto any of the seating inside, as you can see from the diagram. Would we be within our powers to say that if we accept opening of windows on the part of the Auckland Road West site and on the Palmerston Road site, but those two, for safety reasons, we require to be kept shut? Is that possible? Question one.
Just before Mr Manley comes back on that, just to reiterate that the inspector did notice, as you would hope, or did note on the differences in the two elevations and the two highways. He did notice that the Auckland Road West footway was narrower than the Palmerston Road one.
Ultimately, we've given advice as officers to yourselves about the likelihood of a potential of being successful appeal. If members are minded to seek a compromise by a condition along the lines with notwithstanding the details shown of the plan, that the two windows, and if we can identify them on the plan, shall remain fixed, then that's you're entitled to make that decision. You are the determining authority, and if you think that is a compromise, then that's entirely within your gift to make that decision. It would require an additional condition to be added to that. Obviously, the advice we've given is that actually the application in front of us is for the one to be determined, and that's going to be the advice that we will maintain, which is we think that the recommendation, the application we've considered, we think it can be controlled sufficiently through the conditions we've already imposed. The inspector didn't stipulate any differentiation between the two, other than saying that there was a difference in terms of the narrowness, but didn't turn around and say one's none except one's not. And we worked on the basis of the sort of steer from the inspector in relation to that, to say if he's not raising an objection to it and as a means of refusal, but just saying, well, actually, we just need to understand the closing and opening mechanism, that's where we stand. We followed that advice, and the condition that we've imposed, we think we control. So overall, yes, if you wish to go down that, there is a mechanism, but that's not what the recommendation from the officers is.
Councillor Gemman, you?
Yeah, it's more of a comment, and listening to all the advice from our people here, and reading the where it was dismissed, the one issue, you can clearly see that they've come up with a solution. So I'm going to propose that we move this to approval.
Another question before we come to the question, which concerns how we can ensure that someone who is named shall be responsible. There was a suggestion, I think it was in one of the appeals, that closed circuit television or something might do this, but it does seem to be a hammer to crack a walnut. I wonder whether we could have some form of condition that whether we could have some form of condition that required a log to be kept of who was the officers or the staff who were responsible for the opening and closing of windows at any particular time. So at least we know who is responsible.
I think, considering the inspector's decision, had he felt that was a condition that could reasonably be imposed, he was empowered to do that, and that's not actually something that he chose to do. The inspector, it may help if I read from a couple of paragraphs from the decision notice. I'm sure some people will already have read it, but it really does illustrate where this, as far as the planning inspector are concerned, where this one issue lies now. So he recites in a couple of paragraphs, working from 5, width of the footway, considers representation from a local resident in relation to a collision on one occasion. Paragraph 7, he has regard to the eventuality of customers in the building leaning out of the windows. And then, sort of bringing all of his thoughts together in paragraph 8, he holds that despite the above factors, the windows once opened could be dislodged from the existing fittings, holding them in the fully open position. I note that the window opening procedure includes a requirement for the windows to be guided into their exterior locking position and secured. However, I saw that there is currently no means of securing the windows so as to prevent anyone, whether customers or passing pedestrians, from dislodging them from that fully open position. In order to prevent the potential for such a circumstance, and therefore the creation of a potential obstruction and hazard to pedestrians, the installation of appropriate locks for the windows in the open position would be necessary. Importantly, it is unclear from the submissions and my observations as to whether or how such locks could be designed and fitted to fulfil that function. In light of that uncertainty, it would be inappropriate to impose a condition requiring details and implementation of appropriate locks. That's where we are now with such a condition being offered. And therefore, despite finding that the opening and closing of the windows by staff members could be safely achieved, this does not deflect from the potential for collisions with pedestrians caused if the windows were to be dislodged in the above other circumstances. And for those reasons, the development is therefore likely to pose a risk to pedestrian safety. And he concludes by reference to policy. you're now offered a solution to that problem.
Which is in place already, with that locking mechanism.
I would contend that although there is a solution, it is surely up to us to make sure that that solution will work, that it can, that we can be sure in our own minds that we are protecting public safety by some means of ensuring that there is somebody who is responsible. Would this not be the case?
I think, Councillor, the answer to that would be that you have a condition that satisfies the concerns, and enforcement action can be taken using that condition without overcomplicating matters with logs and paperwork and things like that on a more organic footing. If it is breached, the council would be open to receiving evidence of breach in order to take enforcement action.
Councillor Smythe, then Councillor Stagg.
I believe there is another possible solution to this. My preferred option would be to make them either remodel the windows so they could open inside, or to keep them closed. All three. My fallback position would be that Councillor Mason's suggestion would make it safer. I think the business of logs and 3 members of staff and all that is not sustainable, and I can't sit here and approve that while we're relying on that in a busy pub. I do think, though, that they have solved the problem of the latches accidentally getting removed and the wind blowing it and stuff, so I welcome that. But we have to solve the problem of, even if you have 3 people opening the windows and the procedure dealt with, there is the risk of passing pedestrians on the Auckland Road West side, where there isn't a wide pavement, getting hit. We could require them to construct and to put up 2 barriers on the footway for the short minutes when they're opening those windows. And one would have to go round the corner, so that it would stop people going round the corner, and one would have to go on Auckland Road West. That seems to me would be something that we could do, and that those of us who are local residents could see they're doing if they are opening the window, which would mean that residents couldn't accidentally go around the corner whilst the operatives are there. I'm thinking of a child on a cycle or something like that. I'm thinking of an elderly person with limited mobility or sight, or an elderly person indeed in a wheeled thing who might not notice. They could then cause injury to the operatives trying to open the window as well, to be quite honest about it. And I don't want to see any accidents of that nature happening so near to where I live. And I can't, in all conscience, sit here and knowing that there have been accidents and approve the permission as it stands. But if I think, for me, if there were purpose-built, very clear temporary barriers to that bit of the footway for what's going to take about 5 minutes, if that were put up every day, that would warn pedestrians of the potential hazard during that point, that would be my third preference for what we should do with this. But I'm not prepared to agree to this without having some conditions that safeguard the fears and actual experience of people who could be injured. So, I mean, if there were proper A-frame permanent things saying windows being opened, footway closed for 5 minutes, I think that would be something else that could be done.
Thank you. On page 54 of the report, under the comment section, one of the paragraphs says, in these circumstances, this is talking about the background and stuff, the issue that falls for consideration is whether the applicant's revised proposals for opening and closing the windows and means to keep the open windows in place would be sufficient to avert risk to pedestrian safety. My argument is the fact that they're there doesn't mean that they're necessarily averting any problems with safety. They have to be done properly, which goes on to the bottom paragraph, which says all staff will be trained in the correct procedures to operate windows on a regular basis. This will run parallel with standard health and safety training. But who is going to be responsible for doing that? And there needs, in my opinion, there needs to be somebody named who has the responsibility for making sure that every member of staff is trained on a regular basis, because something like a restaurant, you have a turnover of staff, and you're not necessarily going to have everybody trained up. But if somebody is responsible, right, when you're coming in, you have to be trained, this is what you have to do, and ensure that that is what is happening. And over the page, it says the Highway Authority has previously reviewed the procedure for opening the windows and was satisfied that, provided the procedure is adhered to, the risk of incidents with pedestrians would be mitigated. And that is the essential thing. It's all very well having the locks and the handles and whatever there, but unless it's done properly, it's not going to work.
If there was a fatality, then the management would be held responsible under normal common law.
Yeah, quite.
The fact is, though,
We want to avoid that.
I mean, I'm now beginning to be worried about the 2 or 3 operatives that have to lock the window open, as to whether they won't be affected by a child on a bicycle or collision on that corner. So I'm moving in favour of at least requirement to put barriers up at the time they open.
It would seem to me that that would not be unreasonable, because if you look at any public convenience, when they are being cleaned, there is always an A-frame notice put up warning people of the hazard. At the very least, I think, I would agree with you, Councillor Smythe, that we should require that when this procedure is being followed, there shall be a temporary warning notice to warn pedestrians that this is taking place.
But how do we ensure that this procedure is taking place?
Councillor New, can you turn your microphone on? You're not being recorded. We want your words of wisdom.
But you could argue that with the fact of how do you make sure the wet sign's being put up when the floor's being cleaned?
There's usually somebody who's responsible. If you look around the civic offices, there's always somebody in charge, a supervisor, who makes sure that these things happen.
Yeah, but who's making sure that happens?
The supervisor.
Yeah, but you've got one supervisor.
Okay.
Well, it could be the manager or the assistant manager, whoever is the duty manager that day.
Let's take this in order. Order 1, would we be in order to require that a warning notice be placed temporarily whilst these windows are being opened? Can we do that by condition? Members can see why we needed a short break before we came to this one.
Okay, we take the view that to implement what you're suggesting, officers will require delegated authority to go back to the applicant and suggest amendments to the window opening procedure to include such warning signage. And then, assuming that that is something that the applicant agrees to, the committee would be willing to issue conditional permission.
So we would give the officers delegated power to give permission for the windows to be opened and locked back according to the recommendation in front of us, provided that negotiation could ensure that warning notices were provided. Would that be acceptable?
At least 2 warning.
2 warning notices would be provided. and that is included within the procedure. Right, okay. Okay, now, Councillor Smythe.
Sorry to intervene again. I would really like to suggest that we, and this is not a planning matter, but it may be something that you wanted to take up, that we checked on the building regulations. I know as a former planning officer that the building regulations people objected even to people having a slightly protruding bathroom window at a low level, or cloakroom window at a low level, if it stuck out onto the public highway. So I would like to see some of those inquiries made, because it is certainly not good planning practice wherever you go to have windows sticking out at any stage over a highway.
The application in front of us is being determined under the planning legislation. One of the things you must remember about planning, and it's very clear within the legislation, that whilst we might grant planning permission, that does not automatically grant permissions for under any other legislation as is required. So it may be that there are problems associated with this from the Highway Act provisions or building control, but for the determination of the application we must determine that which is in front of us under the planning legislation.
Thank you, I fully understand that.
Yes. Councillor New, would you be willing to have inserted into your proposal that, if you can read the wording here?
It's a bit of a rough and ready note.
This is the trouble with lawyers, they can't read their own writing. That we delegate permission, so that we delegate authority to the officers to conclude an arrangement whereby two temporary notices are placed to warn pedestrians of the opening and closing of these windows.
Yes.
Would you accept that?
Yes.
Thank you. So we have a proposal. Would you second that, Councillor Smythe?
That would be included in the procedure to be applied.
Right. Okay.
Can I ask the Democratic officer what you've got recorded?
What you just said. What Councillor, the Chair just read. You weren't going to read my writing. I've got shorthand. It's just Councillor Mason just read out. I
didn't read it out.
Oh, no, but just what you just said.
Okay.
It must be used
Yes.
every time. Do you
want me to read it?
Yeah, if you
Yes. Okay. The wording.
I will just say what you've just said. Okay, so it's about delegated authority to the officers to conclude an arrangement whereby two temporary notices are placed to warn pedestrians of the opening and closing of these windows.
It's about the location on the
As part, sorry, as part of the opening procedure, is that at the end? Under condition 2.
It's temporary. It's temporary barriers so that people can't accidentally run into the opening and closing, and also to protect the operatives. It's an A-frame of some sort, just like we have in the public lavatories. That's what it is, and it's only for however long in the day.
I think that is the general understanding which our officers have of what your intention was.
Forgive me, to my mind, those A-frames that you refer to are more signs than barriers that would actually physically stop somebody from proceeding through, as a point of clarification only. Yeah.
It's on the pavement, it's not on the wall.
Yeah, and crucially, it's not an obstruction to the highway.
If it is 4 or 5 minutes, it's not on the highway, but it's on the pavement to stop a child cycling into a disaster.
So would it be an obstruction then? Sorry? If it's a small sign, I don't think it would be.
Okay. Those who are in favour of that proposal, please show. I think there was a certain reluctance on some members, which is noticeable, but that has been carried unanimously. We now look forward to seeing the implementation. I hope, as Councillor Jonas said some months ago, never to see this back again. Yes. Well, there were two. Members, we have concluded that item. It took quite a long time, but it needed to be felt around. It's one of those where you cannot come to a very quick conclusion. We now have to consider the item number 4 on your agenda when I can find my own copy of it. Right, thank you. And welcome back, Councillor Pitt.
Thank you, Chair.
We have a report in front of us recommending that we decide whether we wish to reinstate a blanket call for all applications. I would like to introduce this by making one or 2 points. The first one is that we cannot decide here. We can make a recommendation to the planning, the hold of the planning portfolio, that the PRED portfolio decides on this matter, if we wish to make any changes. Secondly, it is very clear that until and unless the portfolio holder makes that decision to change it in whichever way he should wish, the status quo remains, and all planning applications will come to us until and unless the SPD is changed. The third point I would make is that, as we became very well aware earlier this afternoon, we cannot, at the present time, consider or approve changes which are based upon the existence of the 10% rule if a property already has some form of HMO authority, permission. So if it is a C4 use, we really cannot change it if it is merely moving to a sui generis use. However, there are a number of situations in which I think it would be right for us to consider such planning applications. They are obviously the planning issues of the size and appointment of the properties, whether they are healthy, whether they're the right size, the matters which we discussed with 4 items earlier this afternoon. But there are also matters which may be raised by other officers, environmental health, highways, to name but two, which, if they have concerns, then I would suggest that we are the proper place to consider those. I think we need to come to a recommendation this afternoon, because if we keep bringing to this committee applications to upgrade an HMO from C4 to sui generis, we give false hopes to those local objectors. We have seen this afternoon. Secondly, we would risk costs from the Planning Inspectorate. And thirdly, and most seriously, we would risk the Planning Inspectorate deciding that we are not fit for planning purposes to be a planning authority. Their ultimate option is to dismiss Portsmouth City Council as a planning authority, which they can do. As I think Mrs. Upton-Brown reminded us at a previous meeting. So, with that as the preamble, what would you like us to do? Where shall we go? What are your views? Councillor Pitt.
I haven't been intimately acquainted with this policy from the get-go. My concern is that we have amended the SPD around this, and therefore it's in the public domain that the council's declared policy is it will reject sui generis applications where the 10% rule is already exceeded. There will undoubtedly therefore be problems with such planning applications being granted, albeit with the caveat that we lost a load of appeals. We know that, but the public don't. The public, as we saw earlier today, see that we have a declared policy which is to reject them, and we're actually putting them through. So that, for me, is the point of contention. But as you correctly said, Chair, the other parts of that, i.e. the room sizes and improved standards, does seem to stand up to scrutiny, and we have won a couple of appeals based on imposing those room standards. So is it not the case that what we need to be doing is amending the SPD to only include the room standards as a recommendation to the Cabinet member from this committee? Can we do that? That's my first question.
I would have thought we can make whatever recommendations we would like, but I think in addition, if we're thinking of room standards, it is also questions of the other forms of provision which we have looked at, such as the provisions of toilets, the provisions
That's
of,
what I mean,
yeah.
Kieran was pulling a funny face. So, Kieran, what was behind the funny face?
The funny face is, as I think you were identifying, you might pass a resolution, but it's questionable what value it has in terms of whether that would be able to bring about change through PRED. It is a PRED function.
Not disputing that, but what I was trying to find out is, can the Cabinet member for PRED amend the SPD, or if not, who can?
So the PRED member can amend the SPD, but obviously that will be subject to prior consultation and the principles of good governance.
So my point remains the same. What we're proposing here is that we accept that the policy doesn't work, but we're not making any recommendation as a planning committee through this report to the Cabinet member to make that change. And I think we should, because we are ultimately the body that sits and enforces planning policy for the council. So for us to just say, yeah, bring them all back in again so that we can trot through what we've trotted out this afternoon, which is saying, we're very sorry and we know we have a policy, but we can't enforce the policy because it's not worth the paper it's written on, and the reason is keep going over that over and over again, is of no use to man or beast, and it's a deception, because we have a published policy which is available for the public to look at, and that policy is unenforceable. So I'm happy to have And incidentally, Chair, as well, you did say that the current policy is that they are brought here. This specifically says to reinstate the blanket call-in because we did revoke the blanket call-in. So this will be about bringing all those sui generis applications back to the committee, knowing that we're going to be unable to uphold part of that SPD policy, and that to me is an untenable position. The public have a right to know that because the government's planning law is rubbish, and because the government gives powers to the regional inspector to decide from Bristol what happens in Portsmouth, a line that we've trotted out from all parties who sit on this committee over and over and over again, the public need to know that Portsmouth does not have the power to stop the government from cramming people into our streets when we know that it's not providing them with a decent quality of life and that we don't have the services to properly look after those communities. That's the message we need to send back to the Cabinet Member for Pred from today, and we need to reinstate the blanket call-in forthwith so that wherever we can interrogate these policies and use material planning considerations to reject sui generis applications which are inappropriate, we should do so.
Councillor Smythe.
Thank you, Chair. This may not be directly relevant to this particular discussion and decision we've got to make today, and I tend to be subject to further discussion with Councillor Pitt on that. I do think this needs to be something that we are able to say to the public. We will consider again when we come to do our local plan, and which would contain new SPDs. I know we can do that. We may not succeed, but there are places in the country that have succeeded in dealing with this, and I would want to see that we've done some further work to check that out before then.
Mr. Manley.
I think it's important to clarify that basically this paper was brought because previously you had a blanket call-in, then you had the SPG, which came forward, the SPD saying that if it was going to go from C4 to sui generis in an area where it's over 10%, we would resist it. That's the element that's causing the problem for us. In terms of the wording of it, it's the wording which is causing the problem, because there will be situations in relation to a C4 operation that goes to a house in multiple occupation where the level of occupation is so high that we think that it still could have an impact upon the area. Now, the problem we're getting is that at the moment it's a blanket, basically it's our policy saying it's a refusal, so even if it goes up by one, we're bouncing, we have to bring it to committee. That's not going to change with any resolution we make, because our scheme of delegation requires us, if it's contrary to the provisions of the SPD, then it will come to committee anyway. I think we need to be very careful that the SPD, if you are minded to make a recommendation to Pred from this discussion, that you maintain that position, that you can, that there is a resistance to C4, from C4 to sui generis, but where there's demonstrated to be harm associated with it. Because I think the issue you've got there is because the wording of this SPD doesn't stipulate that it's not by fact and degree associated with the level of harm associated with it. It's causing the inspectors to go, well, you're refusing it because it's just one more person, whereas actually, and we'll bring it to the committee because it's contrary to that policy. What I'm saying is actually, if you are recommending that to Pred that is changed, that it's actually going to be looking at not a removal of that and just basing it upon room sizes, but also allowing that to be amended so the officer can carry out a proper assessment of actual harm associated with the change. So if it's going C4 to sui generis, if it's going from 6 to 12, you may think, well, actually that is going to cause harm, and therefore omitting that from the policy, from this SPD, would be wrong. So it's actually, maybe you wish to consider that as well as part of a steer, to say, well, actually, we would like to see that retained, but actually qualified so that it allows officers to carry out that assessment.
The idea of harm is a very interesting and a very useful one. But harm is a very loose concept. It is open to interpretation. Is there any way we could tighten that wording on harm?
I think ultimately it's going to be an officer's assessment. I think that what we have is a blanket SPD that's saying it shall be refused, and what the inspector's saying is actually so far all the ones they've seen, they don't consider that the change from C4 to sui generis is such that it is causing harm. But what I'm saying is actually it may be that we just haven't seen a big enough increase from C4 to, so it may go from 6 to 12. You may consider that it causes harm, but it's allowing the officer to understand and to make that considered opinion without also necessarily also triggering it to committee automatically.
Councillor Stagg? Right, Councillor New?
That's all very interesting, actually, because that's not a discussion we've had here in the last 3 years that I'm aware of. So I'd be interested in having that conversation in more depth. And it has raised a question in my mind that often when we get these appeal decisions back, you're quite right, Sim, that it's about this, it's only one extra person. Yet in reality, it's usually not. And I'm wondering if where we've been going wrong, and this is purely hypothetical because I don't know, haven't not read the decision notices in depth often enough, whether we've included private sector housing standards in the SPD to try and guarantee ourselves a certain level of accommodation. Have we been referencing the same private sector standards in our decision notices to indicate what the increase actually is? Because C4 consent says 3 to 6 unrelated individuals. But in some of these cases, the private sector housing has only been licensing these buildings for 4. Because they're not actually, although that's the category of consent, 3 to 6, some of these houses are not suitable for 6 people. They only become suitable for 7 or 8 people when you build huge amounts of extra room on them, as we've seen all over my ward. So that effectively is going from a house that was licensed under C4 consent for 4 people, and as we've seen today, to go to 8 people. So, Sim, are you saying that it could be that if we can evidence that this is doubling the number of occupants for this particular property, that might, I'm not asking you to stand by it, but might be evidence of harm, because what we could do is say, due to a similar number of sui generis applications within the 50-metre radius, where we have seen an increase in occupants, as I articulated earlier on today, 18 times 3, 54 extra people. So if this was the property number 17 or 18 on that list, and we had seen all of this, is there, in your opinion, is there a point where we may see a balance tip in our favour to be able to demonstrate harm?
In short, no. What I was actually saying is if you've got a C4 use, which is up to 6 people, at this moment in time, the SPG says it should be a refusal if it's in an area of over 10%. That's where we're losing. Now, what I'm saying is that when members were talking about this just now, we were talking about actually that being removed and not because of what the inspectors are saying. What I'm saying, actually, it shouldn't be removed. What it should be is members should think about actually amending or recommending to PRED that the wording be changed so that it's by fact and degree, because there may be circumstances when an inspector would hold that actually the number of people going from 6 to 12 is sufficient to cause harm to the character of the area. And I think it's by fact and degree, because ultimately it is for us to make that considered opinion as a planning authority. And this SPD does allow us, at the moment, it's basically saying if it goes from C4 to sui generis, it's a refusal. And I think that's where the inspectors are struggling. I think what we need to do is amend it to allow the officer to carry out that assessment, to assess what you're talking about, the harm. It would be up to 6, because that's the C4 definition. But it would allow officers to make that consider, so not rather than just getting rid of it as a recommendation to PRED, to actually say to PRED, well, actually, we think the wording should be changed so that it gives officers the ability to consider whether the increase from C4 to sui generis in terms of residential numbers above 6 would be sufficient to cause harm. And I think there will be a point where there's a very large extensions, will take it to a point where at the moment the inspectors are saying, well, 1 or 2 isn't going to cause harm, but it may be if it's sort of like doubling up or tripling up the number of people in there, we could quite justifiably say actually it is causing harm, and the inspector would hold in our favour in respect of that. It's just basically clarifying to say if you are going to go to PRED, that you don't go to PRED with a view to get rid of it in its entirety. Do you get my point?
No, I don't get that at all.
Okay.
That's giving false hope to people, because we have seen, when we were in this position before, does anybody remember the former hotel near the seafront that was going to have 25 bedrooms as an HMO with 1 kitchen with 0.25 metres of work surface per person and 2 fridges, and we turned it down and it sailed through on appeal. So if they're not going to look at a 25 bed HMO as being too big, what are we holding out for? The off chance that somebody puts through a 50 bed one? And the C4 thing's a joke, because it is 3 to 6, but unless we're going to amend the policy to say that it's based on the actual number of people that the property can be licensed for, the loophole here is not 6 to 7, it's 3 or 4 to 7 or 8, and that's where the harm's coming from. So that's the bit we need to sort out, and I don't think where we are or what we might be looking at here would do that. We need some other work to be done. So if the recommendation is go and do some more work on this, that's fine. But in reality, if you've got a 2 up, 2 down house and it has C4 use because it's able to hold 3 tenants, and they go and build another house the same size on the back, which is what we've seen in some instances, it suddenly goes not from 3 to 4, 5 or 6, but 3 to 8. The evidence that we've seen from, I've been here a long time doing these, and the evidence we've seen on dozens of these is they still won't turn them down. So well, my question is, what does harm mean, and how can we evidence it?
Harm is a planning decision, basically. It's that, forgive me, what I'm trying to do is to actually assist in any resolution by just saying, you know, that policy there is or within SPD is causing us a problem, but it doesn't need to be just, if you were to recommend going forward to PRED to change it, to actually not get rid of it in its entirety, I'm trying to assist. So in terms of harm, it's always going to be a planning consideration based upon how we view the proposal and whether or not, from an officer's perspective, we think it causes harm. That is the planning consideration, and that's the whole basis of all of our reports. At the moment, what this report is doing is being brought in front of you to say, do you wish to reinstate the blanket call into committee? That is for you to make a decision on. That's what the recommendation is. But notwithstanding that, what the chair has said is, if you choose not to, these applications will still come back to committee anyway, because the scheme of delegation, if they're contrary to the SPD, in that it is C4 to a sui generis use, and it's within 10%, it will still come back anyway until the SPD is changed. So it is a little bit of a grey area, but what we were trying to do is get a more, and I think Chair was trying to, at the beginning of this, get you to give you a steer to say, well, actually what we should be doing is sending a message to Pred in relation to what we think should be included within the SPD to, or whether or not it needs to be changed to reflect the inspector's decision and allow us to actually operate as an authority.
Councillor Smythe.
I bow to Councillor Pitt's experience on this because I haven't been involved so long. And I'm not sure that and I think I share some of your pessimism that this would help us a great deal. But I do think it would be a good thing to investigate a bit further so that we do, even we might test the inspectorate on if it's a huge increase in numbers and if there is a way in which the planning officer, having done their investigations, can be encouraged to look at the harm, and that's harm to neighbours and neighbourhood and harm to individuals who might be living there. It would be a good thing to test out at what stage he starts upholding our decisions. I'm not suggesting we go into this thinking it's going to solve all the problems, but I certainly think it's an aspect of the reports we've been looking at that hasn't been looked at, and it doesn't therefore satisfy people who are complaining very much anyway. So I would like to see, I don't know if this means postponing again, but I'd like to see a draft of what you're proposing to send to Pred, or so that they will then look at it, I'm sure. Isn't that what you were saying? I did understand, I hope, what you were saying.
Councillor Pitt, before we
I'm sorry, Chair, but this affects my ward more than any other ward in the city. And I live this day in, day out with residents who are fed up to the back teeth with having apparently no defence from the council. We did a huge amount of work. Councillor Jones worked with Councillor Tom Wood. I did a huge amount of work with Claire Upton-Brown on this. We interrogated every single aspect of the issue. And when you read the reasons for overturning on appeal on HMOs, the regional inspector will not consider our parking standards. They will not consider that unrelated individuals in a property in any way detract from an area. They won't consider that one extra person in a property, even though in reality it's sometimes double the number of people in a property, as one of them was today, that was recommended by the officers for conditional permission. So if that's not going to be harm, what is harm? If nobody in the room can give me any sense whatsoever of a hypothetical example where we might succeed, I don't want the published policy of Portsmouth City Council to be open to repeated challenge by both the inspector and the public, so that I go and talk to people on the doorstep and look like an absolute fool, because they're looking on a website and seeing one thing, and we have a policy we know is unenforceable. So either we're honest with the public and we amend it, or we leave it alone and we apply it. But we can't have a halfway house where we do neither, because it's not credible.
I think you floored them. This is the problem, that we have a policy which we cannot enforce. And yet, that policy covers something which we should be able to enforce in some way. This is where the idea of harm was brought up. Because certainly in your ward, in areas where there have been C4s with 3 or 4 people and they move to 7 or 8, the pressure on the community and also on our services is increased markedly. Now the real question is, can we encapsulate that in a modified SPD in a way in which we've got a fair chance of it standing up against people who probably live in rather nice grassy suburbs of Bristol. That's what we've got to do. I'm not sure how we would define harm, but harm might be a way forward. Let's have Councillor Stagg.
Yeah, I was going to ask that. I mean, things like, obviously, parking is my nightmare, and air pollution, etc. And
No, parking is your real nightmare.
yes, it is indeed. But I mean, additional people living in places, I mean, that causes, if they bring cars with them, it causes massive harm. I mean, from a parking, a congestion and an air pollution point of view. But I don't suppose that comes into it anyway, because there's no joined up thinking, is there? No. Okay. Yes.
Chair, in order to get us somewhere, can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
That we do reinstate the blanket call-in, because effectively we don't need to. Because it's already there. Well, no, not because it's already there, but because if officers are going to be caught because they know about the appeals, and therefore, but they also know the SPD exists, so because they know their recommendation is going to be contrary to the SPD, they're going to bring it to the planning committee. So actually the recommendation here is an absolute waste of time. I don't know why we're even discussing it, so let's park that. So we've got that issue, but what we could do is send a recommendation back to the Planning Regeneration Economic Development Cabinet member, asking him to work closely with our new Head of Development Control and our acting Head of Deputy Director for Planning, to see whether or not they can come up with a form of words which are a recommendation for amending the SPD, which may provide us with a solution. Because at the moment we're in a formal setting of a committee, this might be something that's best thrashed out up in the civic offices with the right number of heads around a table, and then could be brought back to us for further consideration.
Councillor Stagg.
Are any other councils dealing with this in a different way?
No.
Okay. I tried.
There are quite a few authorities that I've worked at which are having similar issues with this. It's not in isolation. Anywhere that's got either a very buoyant economy, some like places in the Midland where they have an awful lot of people and it's very lots of business and people need to come in for short periods of time, or where you have student accommodation, this is quite common, and it is a problem that everyone's encountering. I think, and I agree, I think we're all singing from the same song sheet, which is actually, we've got a resolution, we've got a request here, do you want a blanket call-in? It's within your gift as to whether or not you reinstate that or not, as to whether or not you think there's any point in doing that or not. That's the resolution, but certainly, moving forward, the steer that's obviously coming from yourselves is that we need to review the SPD, and particularly how we deal with the C4 to sui generis, so that we investigate whether or not harm can be introduced as part of that, as a proper officer assessment. So the resolution will need to be whatever you decide it's going to be in terms of the proposal made within the report. But obviously what the Chair was talking about at the beginning was a steer from yourselves to send to Pred.
What he just said.
I think that is probably the only way forward we can find this afternoon. Perhaps we might decide to find something more suitable at 3 o'clock tomorrow morning. But at the moment, that is as far as I think we can take it this afternoon. Yeah, I'm jet lagged amongst other things.
Is nothing else that be useful piece of work?
Yes, it would be. Yes.
And I'm told I would urge officers to ask. If anything else, that would be a useful thing to do because of the preparation of our local plan. We've all been curious as to whether any other councils have found the way about it. When I first started on this committee, I was sent a questionnaire from a research student, and they seem to be asking some interesting questions. I'll try and find that and ask him for a copy of his report. That was before I knew the full complexities of this and understood the experience that we'd all had already. But I will try and find his research details.
Members, if I might just summarise what's come from that discussion, it appears that the committee is considering potentially two different recommendations, rather resolutions. The first would be to reject the officer's recommendation. The second would be for the chair to liaise with the member for PRED with regard to improvements to the current SPD.
In consultation with the officers.
In consultation with the officers.
And the head of planning, the chair of planning, and vice chair of planning come to that.
Okay.
Yep.
Could you read that second resolution back then, please?
Okay. For the Chair to liaise with the Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Economic Development regarding improvements to the current SPD in consultation with the officers and the Chair and Vice Chair of the Planning Committee.
No, well, I'm liaising in consultation with myself.
No,
if
that's true.
The case.
Just
so the Chair and Vice Chair, put the word
Chair and Vice Chairman to liaise.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the opposition spokespeople?
Do you want to?
What about the opposition spokespeople for PRED? Because it should be cross-party, shouldn't it? Because it's a cross-party committee.
But Councillor Jones will be on side with that. So.
Again, for clarity, could I then have those two resolutions from the top so we're clear what the committee's considering? Apologies.
The first one is the committee rejects the officer's recommendation, and the second one is for the Chair and the Vice Chair to liaise with the Cabinet Member for Planning, Regeneration and Economic Development regarding the improvements to the current SPD in consultation with the
opposition spokespersons.
Opposition spokespersons and officers.
Oh, she comes in at the beginning.
At the beginning for that.
Can you vote on that?
As far as we can take it this afternoon, I think. I propose it. With Councillor Smythe seconds, because we're the people who are going to have to do some work on it. Vote on it. In favour. That is... Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your courtesy to the Chair, and I wish you all a good evening.